Chapter 28:11. An escaped native guide was obviously a good gimmick. Although some people were nervous, some were uneasy. Most people still wanted to go check it out. Valerie Lysander picked up a dead bird. It looked like it had been squashed to death. But how could it be squashed to death in the sky? But this was an unexplainable mystery. There might never be an answer. Just then, they heard the sound of water. Not long after, everyone saw a pool of water. A waterfall rushed down from the cliff, and the sound of water they heard came from the waterfall. The pool wasn't big, probably only a few dozen square meters. There was a protruding rock in the middle of the pool. And the strangest thing was that there was a golden trident stuck in the rock. "Is that the trident of the sea cucumber Poseidon?" "Don't joke around. That thing looks like a prop that someone deliberately placed there. Is someone messing with us?" At this moment, a vortex-like black cloud appeared in the sky above the pool. With the pool as the center, it spread out in circles. "Point the camera at the sky and capture this strange scene. Mr. Falui, do you want me to take down that golden trident?" Ryan Velast looked at Falui Lysander with eager eyes. "Wait. There seems to be something in the water," Falui Lysander said cautiously. "Water?" Ryan Velast frowned and looked into the water. "Snake! Snake!" A team member who had been close to the pool suddenly yelled and retreated. A ferocious snake head popped out of the water. "Anaconda!" Almost everyone in the team knew the world's largest snake. As members of the Discovery Program's crew, they had all seen an anaconda. It was the only snake in the world that had the ability to swallow an adult. Adult anacondas were generally over 4 meters long, and the largest and longest anaconda found by humans could reach 7 meters. But it was said that in the Amazon rainforest, there were even larger and longer anacondas. And the anaconda in front of them was clearly the super one. It was at least 8 meters long. Its movements weren't fast, but it carried a fatal pressure. Ryan Velast was also scared to the point of breaking out in a cold sweat. If she had risked going into the water just now, she might have been hanged by this forest serpent. One should never doubt the lethality of forest boas. Adult forest boas could even strangle water buffaloes to death. As for humans, they were not even their biggest food source. Even adult caimans were in their diet. As for the super-standard senpai in front of them, its menu would be more extensive. Perhaps their eating speed was very slow, but their killing speed was absolutely top-notch. As long as a human was entangled by the anacondas, it would only take 10 seconds for the anacondas to crush their internal organs. It was as easy as a human popping an egg. Fortunately, the forest boa did not come ashore. Otherwise, it would be very troublesome to deal with this big guy. However, it was also quite troublesome in the water. The anaconda swam slowly in the pool, then climbed onto the rock in the middle of the pool, its huge body wrapped around the golden trident. "It looks like the guardian of the artifact. Maybe that really is the trident of the sea cucumber Poseidon." Who, at this moment, a whistling sound came from above their heads. When they looked up, they saw an extremely fast black shadow flash across the treetops. However, because of its extreme speed, it was beyond the limits of what the human eye could capture. Therefore, they could not see what it was at all. "Patka, you used a high-powered camera. Did you get any images? Let me see." Patka turned on the playback function of the camera. Chen Zhao frowned. He actually did not know that the person was using a high-powered camera. The black shadow just now was an elite in disguise. Chen Zhao did not know if it had been captured. "Mr. Falui, I didn't get the full picture. I only saw a vague black shadow. What animal is it? A monkey?" "No. Although the number of frames is low, I can vaguely tell that it's a human shape. It's definitely not wearing clothes. It looks more like a body wrapped in grass or animal skin. Could it be the same as that giant snake, a wild beast that protects the divine artifact?" Falui Lysander's eyes flashed, his expression hesitant. Everything in front of him indicated that the golden trident placed there was very likely to be the real deal. Even if it was not Poseidon's, it probably had great research value. Falui Lysander looked around. He was not willing to leave just like this. Use the gun to shoot the anaconda. Who, as soon as Falyu Lysander finished speaking, a strong gust of wind blew past without any warning. Everyone swayed from side to side again. Moreover, unlike before, the gale this time was continuous. The surrounding trees were also rustling in the strong wind. Damn, where did this wind come from? Everyone could not even raise their heads. Some people even lay on the ground, waiting for the wind to stop. But before the strange wind could subside, the ground started shaking again. This time, the tremors were much more obvious than before. The water in the pond started churning too. The stone in the center of the pond was sinking, along with the golden trident. Look! That thing is going to sink! Ryan Velast shouted anxiously. But no one could do anything. The super anaconda was still on the golden trident. Ryan Wylist's mind was blank. She wanted to be famous, no matter the cost. Just then, Ryan suddenly sped up and charged toward the pond. Ryan, come back! Falyu Lysander was scared out of his wits. Was Ryan Velast seeking his own death? The supersized forest anaconda in the middle of the pool also noticed Ryan Velast. It couldn't help but raise its head and slightly open its bloody mouth. Qin Zhao frowned. Who knew where West had gotten this anaconda from? It was not the kind of pet that could be tamed. It was just a wild beast that could really devour humans. Ryan would only be committing suicide if he charged over like this. Qin Zhao pressed down with his sneaky palm. Ryan, who had already jumped, suddenly felt an invisible force fall on his head. Splash! Ryan Velast fell head first into the water. Everyone was a little surprised. The scene of Ryan Velast falling into the water did not make sense. Ryan Velast could jump more than 7 meters when he sprinted. But just now, after Ryan Velast took off, he suddenly plummeted from 2 meters away. This clearly violated the laws of physics. Chapter 28:12. Falyu Lysander rushed to the shore and grabbed Ryan Velast. At the same time, he grabbed a rope with his other hand. Pull it back! Let go! That's our chance to become famous! Ryan Velast yelled excitedly. Ryan! Ryan Velast yelled. If you want to die, you better find a place with no one around. Ryan Velast's eyes were still red. But it seemed like she didn't want to die anymore. The two were pulled up by the team members on the shore. Even so, she still couldn't forget about the golden trident in the pond. Qin Zhao also had a new view of Ryan Velast. This woman was willing to die for fame. Although Falyu Lysander also wanted to be famous, he also wanted to get rich. But his desire had never surpassed his rationality. He still looked at everything rationally. He didn't view fame as more important than his life. Enough, Ryan. What we've filmed is enough for you to be famous, Falyu Lysander said. Also, your actions just now can be edited to make you stand out more, Falyu Lysander said. After hearing Falyu Lysander's words, Ryan Velast gave a slight evaluation of the situation. However, her eyes were still filled with longing for the golden trident. But by then, the golden trident had already sunk into the pond along with the floating rock, completely disappearing. Her eyes were still filled with unwillingness. Falyu Lysander and the other 2 members guarded her to the death. They were afraid that she would take things too hard and dive in. Ryan, do you want to live and enjoy the fame and fortune that comes with being famous, or do you want me to help you receive your wealth and glory after you die? Ryan Velast cursed under his breath and finally gave up on the idea of jumping down. Seeing that Ryan Velast had given up on the idea, Falyu Lysander heaved a sigh of relief. If anyone in the team died, it would be a disaster for the team. If it was Ryan Velast, it wouldn't just be a disaster. It would be the end of the world. If the host of a film team died during a filming mission, no matter what the reason was, the team would have to face disbandment. Falyu Lysander suddenly looked at Qin Zhao. He realized that Qin Zhao had remained calm from the beginning to the end. Even when facing the golden trident, he still had a faint smile on his face. It didn't matter if the golden trident was Poseidon's weapon or not. At least the strange sight was real. Any normal person would have some reaction. Why wasn't he reacting at all? Feeling Fal Yui's gaze, Chen Zhao smiled at him. Mr. Chen. Fal Yui Lysander walked over. You're not interested in that? No, I was scared out of my wits. Don't be fooled by how calm I look now. In fact, my legs went soft just now. Is that so? Mr. Chen, your reaction seems to be different from a normal person's. Then what kind of reaction do you want me to make? Yelling? Or, like Miss Ryan, jump into the pool without a care for her life? Apart from the shock? You don't have any other ideas? Hee hee. So what if I want it? If I want it, can you help me get it? Can you help me deal with that big snake? Qin Zhao's words were reasonable. However, his extremely calm performance still made Fal Yui Lysander suspicious. Nevertheless, Fal Yui Lysander didn't pursue the question further. Fortunately, Chen Zhao didn't go crazy like Ryan Velast. Otherwise, it wouldn't end well. Fal Yui Lysander was in charge here. But if Chen Zhao used a large price to lure his teammates into the water, some people might really take the risk. At least, Fal Yui Lysander felt that if he had the chance, he had to take the golden trident for himself. Mr. Chen, you're really lucky this time. Fal Yui Lysander changed the topic. After all, this is an extremely rare material. If it's edited well, it can definitely cause a sensation. It's not just my luck. It's a win-win situation. Qin Zhao was all smiles. Fal Yui Lysander didn't plan on taking the material for himself either. Following the contract was the rule of the industry. If the team had to raise the price just because they got something good, they wouldn't just be ostracized by the entire industry and the TV station. Qin Zhao and the TV station's lawyer could sue them until they doubted their lives. According to the law, everything they were filming now belonged to Qin Zhao. At the same time, Fal Yui Lysander agreed with Chen Zhao. It was a win-win situation. No, all three parties benefited. Qin Zhao was the investor and copyright owner. SCTV was in charge of broadcasting. Also, the team in charge of filming would be able to reap huge benefits. Of course, they didn't know how much they could get. Suddenly, the ground started shaking violently again. This time, it was even more intense than the previous ones. Everyone couldn't stand steadily. Qin Zhao had to pretend that he couldn't stand and fall onto the ground. After all, it was such a strong tremor. If Qin Zhao was still standing steadily, he would not have been able to escape. Even an idiot would know that something was wrong with Qin Zhao. At the same time, the surrounding trees started falling continuously. Large numbers of them fell to the ground, just like dominoes falling down. Large amounts of mud and rocks rushed down from the waterfall into the pool. It didn't take long for the terrain to completely change. The mud and rocks buried the small pool completely. Everyone stood up in a sorry state. After experiencing all the unbelievable things before, Fal Yui Lysander felt that this earthquake wasn't normal either. He immediately said to his subordinate, "Also, use the drone to take a panoramic view of the area." It would have been better if he didn't see it. After seeing it, everyone was in disbelief. With the pool as the center, the dense forest formed an empty space with a diameter of thousands of meters. All the trees in this area had fallen. It wouldn't be strange at all if the trees had fallen because of the earthquake. However, the strange thing was that these fallen trees formed a huge circle. They also saw something even more unbelievable from the panoramic view captured by the drone. The fallen trees seemed to be arranged in an indecipherable pattern. It was like a crop circle, but it was much more complicated than a crop circle. Unbelievable, this is really unbelievable. This can't be a coincidence. There must be a mysterious power here that caused all this. Ryan Velast seized the chance and went straight into filming mode. He spoke to the camera in an excited and high-pitched voice. There was no script or lines, but Ryan Velast knew what to say to attract the audience. Chapter 28:13. In their team, there were people more professional than Ryan Velast. But there really wasn't anyone more eloquent than Ryan Velast, and who was also on camera. That was why Ryan Vilest was so precious. Also, there was her psychological quality. She could readjust her emotions and state in any situation. This was her most outstanding quality. Many people would lose control and rationality when they panicked or were frightened. In our world, there is still some incomprehensible power. Maybe in the future, when technology is developed enough, we can solve it, but definitely not now. Ryan Vilest seemed to be completely unaffected by the previous accident as he spoke confidently in front of the camera. Give Ryan a close-up for 45 seconds, then zoom up and film his explanation from a bird's-eye view. Falyu Lysander ordered the team. After 5 hours of filming, the sky gradually darkened. They went to the beach to set up camp to rest. Generally speaking, if they were going to sleep in the wild, they wouldn't choose to camp on the beach. Because without shelter, the sea breeze would bring a lot of trouble to sleeping in the wild. Also, the weather at sea was very unstable. No one knew when you would be showered with a soul-cleansing downpour. Or perhaps it was a storm that left no traces behind. But Falyu Lysander finally decided to set up camp on the beach. The main reason was that the situation in the woods was unclear. Right now, all the wild animals on the island were in a state of panic. No one knew if they would be attacked by wild animals at night. And in the woods, if they were attacked by wild animals, they were likely to encounter great trouble. At least the view was wider on the beach. Although it was camping in the wild, the film team still needed to film some scenes of sleeping in the wilderness. It was like they were really sleeping in the wilderness. In fact, most of the shows that showed they were sleeping in the wilderness were only shown in front of the camera. They really exposed the team in the wilderness at night without any cover. The risk was too great. Almost no team would take such a risk. This place followed the most primitive laws of nature. Those poisonous insects and beasts wouldn't not bite you just because you were famous. Falyu Lysander planned to film on Gondo Island for 3 days. Although the first day brought him quite a surprise. But the plan wouldn't change. At the moment, they did not have enough material to shoot. Moreover, the material they filmed today would not be in the first episode. Because 3 episodes were a unit, if the first episode was filled with all sorts of supernatural scenes and content, and the second and third episodes returned to mediocrity, then it would only lose its appeal to the general audience. Therefore, the content of today's filming was likely to be split up. Furthermore, the truly important content would be placed in the second and third episodes. Moreover, it was done with enough suspense, leaving room for people to speculate. As for why they were in the territory of the Inca and Mayan civilizations, there will be traces of ancient Greek civilization. That would depend on how they would edit and justify themselves. Qinzhao never doubted their professionalism and abilities. In fact, this was a basic operation for any program production team. Most of the content that ordinary viewers saw on TV was edited. Sometimes, the content that the audience saw was actually very different from the actual situation. Although it was only a temporary camp, the quality of life did not return to its original state. They still had a lot of supplies on board, enough for them not to starve in the wilderness. As for the things that Falyu Lysander had Chen Zhao prepare, they were actually just preparations. They did not really have to use them. For example, the compressed food that Chen Zhao had prepared was still packaged. Chen Zhao did not plan on opening it. "Mr. Chen, you caught this big fish?" Falyu Lysander looked at the tuna that Chen Zhao was dragging in disbelief. It was at least 100 kilograms. If the tuna was not still alive, he would have suspected that Chen Zhao had prepared it beforehand. "Of course. Many of your subordinates saw it. You're too lucky," Falyu Lysander said in shock. "A big fish like this almost never gets close to the shoreline. Why did one have to go to the deep waters to fish? It was because it was almost impossible to catch a big fish on the shoreline. It was not absolutely impossible, but the probability was very small. After all, Falyu Lysander was a wilderness expert. He naturally knew how much luck Chen Zhao needed to catch a big fish. Also, look at this 100-kilogram tuna. Dragging it out of the water also required a lot of strength. It could even reach 200 kilograms in the water. In fact, if Falyu Lysander saw the process of Chen Zhao fishing and dragging the rod, he would be speechless. Because Chen Zhao was completely fishing for a small loach. During dinner, with this tuna as a side dish, the team still had a good meal. Even if there were more than 20 people, they still wouldn't be able to finish a fish that weighed more than 100 kilograms. After cleaning the organs and scales, there were at least 70 kilograms of edible parts left. In the end, Chen Zhao had to finish all the remaining tuna. At home, Chen Zhao was basically in charge of cleaning up. At home, Chen Zhao had beef, mutton, and fish on the table every day. They were all self-sufficient. Apart from when they were slaughtered, they would be given to the slaughterhouse in town. Chen Zhao had a lot of people at home. Apart from Fei Lai and the children, there were also dozens of underlings and pets. So, when Chen Zhao was at home, he needed at least 5 cows and 20 sheep every day. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, everyone in the campsite started chatting. The moon was bright, and the clouds were parting. The sky was extremely clear. Under the starry sky, although everyone was tired, they were still in high spirits. Chen Zhao and Falyu Lysander sat on a rock and chatted. "Mr. Falyu, do you still believe in the supernatural now?" Falyu Lysander glanced at Chen Zhao. "Mr. Chen, did you already know that there were these things on this island?" Falyu Lysander remembered that after he'd signed with SCTV had requested that his first filming location be Gongdu Island. They'd also specified that it had to be Gongdu Island. Apparently it was a request from the investors. At the time, Falyu Lysander hadn't thought much about it, but now that he thought about it, he felt that Chen Zhao probably knew this would happen. Also, when it happened, Chen Zhao's reaction was so calm that it defied logic. Shouldn't he be panicking and at a loss like everyone else? "That's not important." Chen Zhao chuckled. "You got good material and I can recoup my investment. SCTV can get good ratings. That's the result of making a profit, right?" Chapter 28:14. Falyu Lysander had guessed. Everything that had happened today might have been Chen Zhao's plan. But some things could be arranged. Some things definitely couldn't be arranged with current technology. For example, an earthquake of that magnitude was enough to be used as a weapon. If there really was such a weapon, it would definitely cause a world war. Even if there was, Chen Zhao couldn't get it. Also, the strange phenomenon of the ring-shaped clouds in the sky didn't seem man-made either. Suddenly, Falyu Lysander heard someone exclaim. Falyu Lysander didn't know what was going on. Then, he heard the howls of beasts in the forest. The most obvious was the howl of wolves. There were also many beasts that he had heard before and some he hadn't. Falyu Lysander immediately stood up. "Camera! Camera! Turn on the camera and record the scene in the forest. Turn on the recording device too. Head, look at the sea." Falyu Lysander turned to the sea in surprise. On the surface of the sea, black dots of various sizes were constantly leaping up and down. "What's that?" "A fish tide," Chen Zhao said. "It usually happens in the sea. When a fish tide happens near the sea, it usually means a tsunami." Falyu Lysander's eyes widened. The light in his eyes gradually turned from shock to fear. It was his first time facing a possible tsunami. The water on the coastline was really retreating. "Everyone, retreat into the forest immediately and find a high place. Hurry! Hurry!" Falyu Lysander yelled. He couldn't see the tsunami yet. But the signs of the water retreating and the noises on the surface proved that they were about to face a tsunami. It might be an extremely shocking one. Thankfully, Gongdu Island wasn't big, but there were many high places. They soon found a place to stop on a mountain that wasn't too tall or short. Just then, they could see a white line on the coastline under the moonlight and starry sky. The tsunami was really coming. "I think it's 20 meters," a team member said. However, the tsunami was still very far away. He didn't have professional tools to measure it. He could only judge based on his own senses. What was 20 meters? It was close to the highest tsunami in history. In human terms, it was about 6 stories tall. A 6-story tall tsunami was definitely in existence that could destroy anything. The first thing that came into contact with Gongdu Island was not the tsunami, but the howling wind. At the same time, the tsunami also brought along a huge airflow. All the trees on the island were blown over. The heavy responsibility at the top of the hill could only lie on the ground. He couldn't even lift his head due to the strong wind. Only the cameraman, who was in charge of operating the camera, continued to shoot. Chen Zhao secretly took care of them. After all, Chen Zhao had created such a big scene. It wasn't just for them to see. It was for the TV audience. When the tsunami reached the coastline of Gongdu Island, everyone was shocked. Because it was not a 20-meter tsunami, but a 40-meter tsunami. Of course, with the height they were at, there was no need to worry about tsunami attacks. Unless the tsunami could reach 100 meters. However, if there really was a tsunami of 100 meters, they basically didn't have to worry about the tsunami because they might have to worry about the end of the world. For them, a 40-meter tsunami was no longer a tsunami, but a historical event. They were facing the emergence of a new historical record. The entire Gongdu Island trembled in front of this tsunami that represented historical records. Look! What's that? Everyone looked over. They could vaguely see a huge shadow in the water curtain raised by the tsunami. That huge black shadow was not the shadow of the sea, nor was it a stone or something like that. It was a living thing. It wiggled its body in the water curtain and then disappeared. But most people saw that thing. It was huge. Shockingly huge. Did you film it? Did you film it? Did you film it? Falyu Lysander asked anxiously. I filmed it. I filmed it too. I filmed it. Chen Zhao's lips curled into a smile. He had asked Amon to appear, of course, to create a sensation. He didn't need to reveal his true form. Just a glimpse was enough. Only then could it create a greater effect. Because that moment would bring about a heated discussion. If it revealed its true form, it wouldn't just cause heated discussion. It might cause panic. In the past 6 months, Amon hadn't grown bigger. Instead, he shrunk. At his peak, Amon was more than 1,000 meters tall, and weighed almost 1,000,000 tons. As a result, he could only move around the Mariana Trench. Because he was in shallow waters, a flip would cause a huge wave. So, there had been some video sightings last year. Of course, those sightings were huge waves that appeared out of nowhere. But half a year ago, his power had increased by leaps and bounds. The sudden increase in power had caused his body to grow in reverse. In his normal state, his length had shrunk to around 500 meters. His weight had also decreased to 300,000 tons. He was 68 meters tall. He also had the ability to change his body shape, but it couldn't last long. He could shrink his body to 200 meters, but that could only last for 30 minutes. The glimpse just now was what he looked like when he shrunk to his limit. Although it was only 200 meters, he was already a giant. No creature on Earth could grow to this level. Qin Zhao had Amon shrink mainly because the tsunami couldn't accommodate his body. If he was released in his normal 500-meter tall form, the tsunami wouldn't be able to cover his height. He would be taller and longer than the largest ship in the world. Falyu Lysander trembled in the strong wind. But it wasn't because of fear. It was because of excitement. This was an unprecedented event, an unprecedented event. And he was the one who recorded it and discovered it. He, as well as his team, would gain both fame and fortune from this. Falyu Lysander looked at Qin Zhao subconsciously. Qin Zhao also looked at him and gave him a smile. He seemed to be mouthing, "Good job." Falyu Lysander frowned, but he didn't think too much about it. Qin Zhao's calm reaction was indeed unusual. But at the moment, he was about to lose his mind from the predictable success. Of course, the most important thing now was to protect the results and not have any casualties. Otherwise, it would be very troublesome. Chapter 28:15. The next day, when the sun shone on Gongdu Island, Everyone felt like they had been reborn. Actually, the tsunami last night wasn't that scary to them. After all, they were on the top of the mountain. Unless the tsunami destroyed the entire island, they wouldn't be hurt. Also, the terrain of Gongdu Island meant that it wouldn't cause any damage. At most, it would destroy some of the forest soil. When the tsunami washed ashore last night, about half of Gongdu Island was submerged in seawater. In such salty soil, all the plants there would die. Only after a few decades would the salinity in the soil degrade and plants would grow again. Qin Zhao didn't feel guilty about the damage he'd caused. He could just donate a few $100,000 to the local government as compensation. But for the film crew, what happened last night was a magical experience. The entire process could only be described as unbelievable. But their biggest problem now was that the boat had been overturned. No, to be precise, it hadn't been overturned. The boat was now on the ground of Gongdu Island, lying 300 meters from the coastline. Their attempts to contact the outside world all failed. In the end, Chen Zhao had to secretly inform West to find a boat. In the evening of the same day, a ship discovered them. Falui Lysander quickly reached an agreement with the boat owner and agreed to send them inland. By this time, their cameras had recorded more than 200 hours of footage. This was enough for them to edit 3 episodes. There were even some production teams that would cut out an entire season's worth of broadcast time. Of course, to ensure quality, Falui Lysander clearly planned on simplifying the content. He'd condensed the essence into these 3 episodes. Falui Lysander stood on the deck, enjoying the sea breeze with Qin Zhao. "Mr. Qin, where do you think the Lost Civilization should be filmed next?" The progress of the Lost Civilization project was too rushed, mainly because of Qin Zhao's urging. Right now, only Gongdu Island was decided by Qin Zhao. There were still 3 more, but Falui Lysander didn't have any clues yet. Falui Lysander was confident that the content on Gongdu Island would cause a huge sensation. But if they couldn't keep up with the rest of the content, the effect of the Lost Civilization would be greatly reduced. This was also what gave him the biggest headache. He even considered whether or not he should artificially create something. Qin Zhao thought about it and said, "Mysterious Island. Ever since it appeared, it's been the center of public opinion." "Mysterious Island? Is it the island that suddenly rose from the bottom of the sea 3 months ago?" "Yes. No TV crew has been able to land on Mysterious Island. TV stations all over the world want to land on the island, but none of them have been denied. Only a small number of researchers have been able to land on the island, and the equipment they bring with them is restricted. They are not allowed to bring cell phones, video cameras, or cameras. All the photos we have seen so far are provided by the Mysterious Island officials. I'm the owner of that island," Qin Zhao said. "At least I'm a major shareholder, so I can decide." Falui Lysander froze for a moment, an expression of icy appearing on his face. No wonder Qin Zhao was so rich. Everyone knew that the Mysterious Island was a treasure trove the moment it appeared in front of them. Nowadays, any project on the mystical island represented great wealth. It was home to the most amazing food chain and marine life that had ever been discovered. It was like the dinosaur island in Jurassic Park, full of wonders and inconceivability. "Mr. Qin," Falui Lysander said casually, "Gongdu Island will also attract attention." Qin Zhao shook his head. "After the show airs, there will indeed be a wave of exploration, but if there are no more discoveries, people's enthusiasm will quickly fade. How do you know that others won't discover anything? The ancestors of the local natives lived on Gongdu Island for hundreds of years, and they rarely encountered such a scene. What do you think are the odds that the researchers and tourists will encounter the day and night that we experience before their enthusiasm wanes?" Qin Zhao said disapprovingly. "Also, the Mexican government might list Gongdu Island as a forbidden area and not allow outsiders to get close. This was how most governments handled things. Usually, when supernatural events occurred in certain areas, the government would not develop it into a tourist project. First, they would list it as a forbidden area and then send their own team to investigate and see if they could discover any supernatural powers. This was a normal operation. Every country had such a plan. Secondly, although Mexico was also part of North America, the spiritual world here was more active than in America. The number and quality of people in the spiritual world were also higher than in America. Therefore, it was very likely that the government would explore and develop Gondu Island themselves. Of course, the local government was doomed to not find anything valuable here. After all supernatural things were man-made. It would be strange if they could find anything. The filming team did not stay in Mexico. That night, they returned to Los Angeles under Chen Zhao's arrangements. This was because Chen Zhao wanted the show to be aired as soon as possible. This was also the condition of the agreement with SCTV. Thus, Falui Lysander had to edit 3 episodes as soon as possible. According to the broadcast plan, the first episode would be aired this Saturday night. This kind of broadcast plan was not very beneficial for the show. There was no previous promotion. Even the trailer was cut at the last minute. The broadcast time was less than a week. It was too rushed for the show. However, the trailer had a slogan. The first show in history to film supernatural scenes. Moreover, the superficial scenes still made the trailer have an unimaginable effect. The first feedback came from the click and play on the internet. The biggest platform had over 1 million views that night, and over 10 million views in 24 hours. The video also started to spread around the world. Chen Zhao opened the trailer and watched it. An exploration of civilization, an unbelievable journey. We went on a pilgrimage with reverence. But we were confronted with a sight that was unprecedented in history. The background music in the trailer used a deep and thick voice to describe the unbelievable scenes in the scenes. At the end, the screen in the trailer suddenly turned black, followed by the sound of the tide and a voice with a hint of fear. When we thought we were about to discover the truth, we were greeted by the most terrifying welcome ceremony. We saw the most terrifying side of nature. We have witnessed nature at its worst. Maybe it was the most terrifying side of nature. Maybe it was not nature. Lost civilization, don't use your worldview to challenge the real world. Chapter 28:16. The trailer for the Lost Civilization didn't last long. But it still caused quite a stir. Of course, a trailer was just a trailer. So, while it was effective, it didn't cause much of an impact. After all, many TV shows like to be mysterious. Who knew if this was another purposely mystifying announcement? Of course, it was still effective. At least, from the feedback from SCTV, the trailer was quite good. As for the ratings, it was hard to say. After all, SCTV was a local TV station. The coverage was rather limited. It didn't even cover all of California. In the past few days, Chen Zhao and the Supernatural organization were still trying to find the core members of the England gang. Although Milo Tanzik Williams and his cronies had disappeared from Los Angeles. But his influence hadn't completely disappeared. In just 2 months, Milo Tanzik Williams had left his mark in Los Angeles. A deep mark. Everyone was afraid of this bloody emperor. Milo Tanzik Williams only took 2 months to do so. He'd erased what Morgari had only managed to do in the past 2 years. Of course, bloody methods could achieve the goal. But there were repercussions. Just like Chen Zhao. If he used the same method, he could achieve the same result. But what about the consequences? From then on, he could only hide in a dark corner and enjoy wine and women. He didn't even dare to contact his family. That was how Milo Tanzik Williams was right now. The government's revenge came so quickly and without warning. Although Milo Tanzik Williams escaped unscathed. However, his forces were also directly wiped out. To put it bluntly, he was a stray dog now. But he was a stray dog. He was qualified. At least he knew how to hide and endure. Chen Zhao dug out almost all his cronies in Los Angeles and tortured them to death. But Milo Tanzik Williams still couldn't come out. Chen Zhao didn't know how many of Milo Tanzik Williams' cronies were left in Los Angeles. There were definitely more, but they were hidden. They weren't as ostentatious as before. Chen Zhao was helpless about this. If he spread out his senses, he could even cover half of Los Angeles. But his senses weren't omnipotent. At least, he couldn't monitor other people's hearts. Now, he could only hope that the broadcast of Lost Civilization could lure Milo Tanzik Williams out. However, Los Angeles was now completely controlled by Tim and Bodhi. Tim was in the light, while Bodhi was in the dark. However, Bodhi's betrayal was public. Chen Zhao hoped to use this to attract Milo Tanzik Williams' subordinates. Unfortunately, apart from the first few days when he attracted a few people, no one else came to die. Of course, Bodhi knew what Chen Zhao wanted. But there was nothing he could do. Chen Zhao's power made it impossible for him to resist and betray Chen Zhao. Saturday night, 2010. The Lost Civilization was finally broadcasted. While the subtitles were still on the screen, the commentator had already started explaining in his deep voice. On the south coast of Mexico, in the village of White Bunch Flowers. To Mexicans, the white bouquet symbolizes the welcome of friends from afar. However, to the natives of this land, the white bunch flower also symbolized God's gift and gift. In ancient Greece, the white bouquet represented a gift from God. The two seemingly unrelated ancient civilizations formed a connection through the white bunch flower. The TV showed the beautiful scenery of the south coast of Mexico. Finally, the scene changed to the white bunch flower village. Our first stop on our journey of discovery, the white bunch flower village. Ryan, we met an interesting old man. It's said that he migrated from a small island. Really? Where is he? The show was progressing according to the plot. This was also one of the selling points of the show. Then, they found the old man in an old, rundown house. They heard many vivid stories from the old man. Of course, most of the stories told by the old man had been edited and edited. So no one knew if what he said was the original meaning and content. Of course, it didn't matter. But it also misled the audience. The audience thought that the old man would tell a story that matched their understanding. However, the customs and stories were completely different from the Incan or Mayan civilization that they knew. In the story, they believed in the sea god on the island. They fought against the monsters in the sea. Their handicrafts, their skills, and their language were also mentioned. Some things didn't need to be too clear. It was fine as long as it was plausible. Did you notice that the language of the Gongdu people is completely different from the ancient Incan or Mayan language system that we know? Generally speaking, language is a derivative of culture, so the language will have strong traces of regional civilization. However, the language of the Gongdu people is very different from the languages and civilizations of Mexico and even the Americas. Ryan turned to look at his teammate, Winston. You're a language expert. Do you have any professional explanations? Winston nodded. There is indeed a big difference. For people in the field of language, to distinguish the difference between regional languages is not to look at the words used in the language, but through the pronunciation structure. For example, after thousands of years, some people have been separated from a civilization. Their language and culture have changed, but their basic pronunciation will not change. However, the Gongdu people are incompatible with the previous civilization. This means that before they came into contact with the regional civilization, they had already come into contact with other civilizations. This also caused their customs, traditions, language, and beliefs to be incompatible with the regional civilization. Then wouldn't they be excluded or even destroyed by the local civilization? The ancient people didn't know how to distinguish between outsiders and their own people. What's more, the Incan civilization and the Mayan civilization were both extremely complex civilizations. They were not the kind of politically unified countries, but made up of countless tribes with completely different cultures and customs. Because of this, the Mayan civilization and the Incan civilization were destroyed in the end. As a tribal society, the population base was too small to reach the level of a country. Perhaps there were smart people or even geniuses among them, but these smart people and geniuses couldn't adapt to the environment at all because in that kind of social environment, only the strong were qualified to survive, not the smart. From the perspective of people in our era, of course, we know that the strong are responsible for protection, and the smart are responsible for development, but the people of that era didn't understand. Maybe we should go to Gongdu Island to take a look. Maybe there will be more discoveries. Chapter 28:17. The academic discussion did not go too far. Then, they prepared to land on the island. There were also some intentional accidents. For example, something was pulled down, causing Lane to fly into a rage. Another example would be some non-standard operations. While a certain someone was cursing out loud, he would also teach them about standard operations. The first episode of The Lost Civilization stopped there. There were also some scenes that weren't reshoots. They were completely fake. Qin Zhao had overestimated Falyu Lysander's professional ethics. In order to be mysterious, they purposely created some abnormal scenes. For example, when their ship was about to set sail, the engine suddenly caught fire, and they quickly evacuated the ship. In fact, it was very smooth when they set sail. They didn't encounter any problems during the voyage, except for the native guide. Moreover, they had also taken a few more photos, including finding the native guide again. Anyway, it was all about being mysterious to the extreme. When they reached Gongdu Island, the earthquake was supposed to happen an hour after they landed. But after some reshoots and editing, they brought the earthquake forward. When they landed on the island, there was an earthquake immediately. Then, there were startled birds and abnormal winds. Then, there was the native guide's warning to them. It was a warning from God. Then, there was the scene where he was scared away. The first episode ended there. One had to admit that if Falyu Lysander went to Hollywood to film a horror movie, the effect would definitely be good. At least, he was an expert in creating an atmosphere. It left enough suspense, and at the same time, created a strange and bizarre atmosphere. Finally, after the subtitles, there was another sentence. This show is completely real. There is no fiction. This sentence was amazing. The audience would just treat it as a story. In fact, some shows would pretend to be exploration shows. Then, they would arrange some supernatural scenes to attract attention. However, that kind of specious supernatural experience was obviously incomparable to Lost Civilization. Let's not talk about the reshoots first. Just the actual earthquake, the flock of startled birds, and the abnormal wind direction that came without warning gave the audience a different feeling. Mr. Chen, congratulations. This is unbelievable. Do you know what our ratings are tonight? Scully called, and his tone was filled with surprise. At the moment, Chen Zhao had just finished watching The Lost Civilization. However, he didn't look too excited. To be precise, he wasn't very happy at the moment. Because Falyu Lysander didn't do as he asked. Chen Zhao wanted the first episode to have content that clearly pointed to ancient Greek civilization. However, Chen Zhao didn't see anything about this from the beginning to the end. Did Chen Zhao expect those gangsters to be familiar with ancient Greek culture and guess that it was ancient Greece from the bits and pieces of the show? Chen Zhao didn't care about the ratings. He didn't care about profits or losses. He didn't even care what else was going to happen next. He wouldn't care even if the show stopped after these 3 episodes. Chen Zhao had invested in Lost Civilization. The goal was to lure Milo Tanzik Williams and his men out. In the end, Milo Tanzik Williams was not lured out. The ratings were surprisingly high. The highest number of views reached 5.8 million. At the same time, it has a 75% market share in California. Scully didn't hear Chen Zhao's reply. He thought that Chen Zhao was feeling the same way he was. Therefore, he said to himself, "Now, there are already 2 TV stations that are part of the top 5 that hope to import Lost Civilization. Mr. Chen, do you need me to talk to them? I'm very experienced in this field." "No need." Chen Zhao's face darkened. "I'm tired. That's all." With that, Chen Zhao hung up. On the other end, Scully was stunned. What happened? Why did he feel that the Chinese guy was unhappy? Did he say something wrong? Scully thought back, but he really didn't know how he'd offended Chen Zhao. When he called again, he realized that the line was busy. After hanging up, Qin Zhao called Falui Lysander. Mr. Lysander. Mr. Qin, hello? Did you watch tonight's show? What do you think? I'm very dissatisfied, Qin Zhao said directly. You don't seem to have listened to me. What? Mr. Qin, I don't understand. I've said it before. The first episode has to be about ancient Greece. I've already laid the groundwork with some clues that point to this content, but time is limited. I can't directly tell the audience about ancient Greece. This requires a gradual progression of the plot, and I feel that this kind of arrangement will leave more suspense and attract more viewers. I don't want to attract more viewers. I don't need this show to make money. I have my own requirements. If you can't meet them, then you're not qualified. Qin Zhao's words were extremely harsh. He rarely got so angry at someone. You better understand one thing. I'm the boss. I don't want this to happen again. Thankfully, Qin Zhao was still able to control himself. After a few complaints, he softened his tone. Is the second episode's post-production done? Falui Lysander didn't understand why Qin Zhao was so angry. Judging from the effect of today's broadcast, it should be very good. Scully had also called him earlier. He didn't understand why Qin Zhao was so unhappy. Was it because he didn't absolutely follow Qin Zhao's requirements? To him, Qin Zhao's requirements were very unreasonable and unprofessional. The content about ancient Greece was a gimmick. If it was set up properly, it could cause a sensation. It could even cause an academic sensation in the archaeology world. Then, it could cause a craze for the general audience from the academic world. Then, the show would be pushed to the peak. Not like what Qin Zhao had requested. Just bring out the content about ancient Greece directly. This would reduce the suspense and fun by half. Let me ask you, Qin Zhao asked in a low voice. Is the second episode's content done? Yes. Falui Lysander didn't understand Qin Zhao's current state at all. When he'd first met Qin Zhao, he thought that Qin Zhao was easy to get along with and had a good temper. Why did it suddenly erupt at this time? Give me the second episode's content first. I need to confirm it. Chapter 28:18. Falui Lysander was hesitant. If he rejected Qin Zhao now, it would mean that they were going to fall out. It would also mean that he would have to go against Qin Zhao in court. Just then, Falui Lysander recalled the contents of the three-party contract. The compensation for breach of contract was 15 times the amount of the investment. The investment was 20 million. This meant that if he lost in court, he would have to pay 300 million. He couldn't even pay 3 million, let alone 300 million. In the end, his rationality won over his hesitation. Going against a rich person in court was a very unwise decision. Plus, he'd violated the contract first. He was digging his own grave. In America, if he faced such a huge compensation, then it was really possible that his family would break up and he would be deserted. The next day, Falui Lysander obediently brought the edited sample of the second episode to Qin Zhao's house. When he saw the manor beside Mirror Lake, Falui Lysander truly felt what it meant to be rich. The mansions he'd seen in the past were like grass sheds in the countryside compared to Mirror Lake Manor. Falui Lysander was also a rich person. But at the moment, he realized that he was at least a Pacific Ocean away from the truly rich. If he knew that Qin Zhao's income for one day was equivalent to half of his lifetime's worth, who knew what he would think? The most popular saying now was, "Don't use your annual income to challenge my pocket money." Falui Lysander wasn't just shocked. He was also afraid. When rich people reached a certain level, they'd start playing politics. Politics was a dangerous thing in a society where money reigned supreme. Then, Falui Lysander entered the manor. This place really opened his eyes. The front yard was already bigger than the total area of his house. There was also a huge grassland in the backyard and the forest beside it. They were also part of the manor. In feng shui terms, it would be mountains and rivers. The east wind welcomed and sent, bringing in wealth and treasures. The green dragon lay down, and the wind and rain adjusted. It wasn't a dragon's vein, but it was still a great place with good feng shui. Of course, Falyu Lysander didn't know feng shui, but he knew that all these things added together would be extremely expensive in Los Angeles, where every inch of land was expensive. When Falyu Lysander saw Qin Zhao didn't give him a good look. Qin Zhao knew Falyu Lysander's request and his starting point. However, Qin Zhao didn't like it when people thought they were right, especially when she ignored his request. This was the dissatisfaction of a consumer towards all the good intentions. "Please take a seat, Mr. Farage." Qin Zhao took the sample and put it in the player. Falyu Lysander looked a little uneasy as he watched the broadcast content that he had personally reviewed. In fact, the sample that was being played this time was edited by him and his team last night. He also added some things, which were what Qin Zhao had requested before the first episode was aired. Actually, the second episode was supposed to be analyzed. However, he would still hold back. But because of Qin Zhao's forceful request and attitude, she couldn't help but cry. Still, he added more content to the story. While watching, Qin Zhao kept his face covered. When the video ended, Qin Zhao's expression softened. Qin Zhao finally smiled. "Mr. Falyu, I'm very satisfied with the content of the second episode. I'm sorry for my attitude before. Mr. Qin, you must be joking. You're my boss now. You have the right to request anything from me. I should be the one apologizing." No one knew what Falyu Lysander was thinking. However, at least he gave in on the surface. Going against Qin Zhao head-on wouldn't do him any good. Qin Zhao didn't care if Falyu realized his mistake or not. Qin Zhao would only have a short interaction with Falyu anyway. After the filming of the show, she and he would be people from two different worlds. As long as Falyu could give him what he needed and the result he wanted, it would be fine. The first episode had already been aired. No matter how angry Qin Zhao was, it wouldn't change anything. Shedding all pretense of cordiality with Falyu Lysander would allow him to vent some of his anger. However, it wouldn't change the situation at all. Moreover, his investment and time would be wasted. So, Qin Zhao decided to forgive Falyu Lysander this time. "Mr. Chen, I have a question. Is it convenient for you to answer it?" "What is it?" "I can't guarantee that I can answer it. Mr. Chen, I think you're a rational person. You should know that the content I arranged is the best choice. Why do you have to solve the mystery of ancient Greece? I said that I'm not investing in this show for profit. You can treat it as interest if you accept this explanation. Of course, if you don't, I won't give you another answer." This answer clearly wasn't the real reason. Of course, Falyu Lysander wasn't satisfied. Qin Zhao had pretty much said, "I'm just finding an excuse to brush you off. It didn't matter if you accepted it or not." "Fine," Falyu Lysander replied helplessly. Falyu Lysander didn't stay for long. He found an excuse and left. Qin Zhao didn't plan on asking Falyu Lysander to stay for lunch either. Portia, Zephyra, and Navikalina came one after another. Qin Zhao left the kids to his 3 assistants. Then, he went out. He'd been back for more than 2 weeks. Qin Zhao had always left Xiaohe with Ethan. Before bringing her out, Qin Zhao had said that she wouldn't have anything to do with him anymore. But she was still half on his side. As long as it was within his power, he would help her if he could. West had said that he wanted to interact with her. But then, he said that he would let her live peacefully. There was no need to drag her into trouble. When Qin Zhao arrived at Ethan's motel, he saw Xiaohe sitting on the stairs in a daze. "Hey, did Ethan kick you out?" Qin Zhao teased. Of course, Qin Zhao believed that Ethan wouldn't do that. Ethan valued money as much as his life, but he still had morals. Xiaohe raised her head and looked at Qin Zhao. "Mr. Chen, how come you're here?" Xiaohe looked at Qin Zhao listlessly. She'd gotten over her initial unfamiliarity with going abroad. She was basically familiar with the environment and had gone out with Li Qing a few times. Actually, she didn't have much interest in LA. LA was an international metropolis, but it wasn't much better than Shanghai. Right now, she was just lacking in spoken English, but basic communication was fine. I'm here to see an old friend and see if you've been sold. Chapter 28:19. Xiao He didn't react too excitedly to Qin Zhao's joke. She didn't even bother to retort. Instead, she continued sitting on the stairs, holding her chin with a worried expression. Tell me, what's bothering you? Share it with me. I submitted my application to UCLA a few days ago, Xiao He said, frowning. I don't know if I can pass the first round. Her results in China were pretty good. But she really didn't have much confidence in her application this time. She was waiting for a response from UCLA. This process was too torturous for her. Which UCLA campus? LA. When did you submit your application? I'll check for you. 4 days ago. It's March 2nd, right? Qin Zhao took out his phone and called Right. Hi, darling. How are you? Not good at all. I recently got C2H6O deficiency syndrome. Qin Zhao froze. Fuck, you just don't have alcohol. You're almost 100 years old. Who dares to let you drink every day? Then I'll send you 2 bottles tomorrow. Say it. What's up? Right was very decisive. Since she was getting benefits, it was time to get down to business. Qin Zhao definitely wouldn't call her at this time to say hello. Usually, Qin Zhao would only visit her in the afternoon. He would go to school personally. Calling her at this time definitely meant that he had something important to talk about. I have a friend who submitted an application to the school. Can you help me check it out? What do you mean? Just check, or do you want me to let her go? Right didn't understand Qin Zhao's intentions. If it was just to check and help Qin Zhao's friend pass the first round, it was just a small problem. This was a small problem that could be solved with just a few words. But there was still the interview. The requirements for the interview were much higher. Under normal circumstances, the requirements for UCLA's LA campus weren't as simple as being excellent in both academics and conduct. Being excellent in both academics and conduct was just the basic requirement. If Wright wanted to use her connections, she could pass no matter what the results were. But the prerequisite was that Qin Zhao had to sponsor some money. I just want to give her an interview. Qin Zhao didn't plan on helping Xiao He get in directly. If she just wanted to waste time, it didn't matter where she went. Staying in Ethan's motel and doing nothing was the same as staying in the dorms. If she really had the ability, then she would rely on her own ability to pass the interview. That was also her ability. Sure, what's your name? Yi He. Qin Zhao turned around and looked at Xiao He. How old are you? After graduating from Jiaodong University, I applied for the Department of Construction Engineering. 21. Xiao He replied. Qin Zhao then told them about Xiao He's basic information. The application was submitted on March 3rd. All right, I'll take a look and arrange an interview for her as soon as possible. After thanking him, Qin Zhao hung up and turned to look at Xiao He. Okay, get ready. There should be a notification in 2 days, Qin Zhao said. You better be at your best. Xiao He was naturally very grateful to Qin Zhao. But what followed was even greater panic. After all, the application was just waiting, and the interview would be more challenging. If she really had a fearless mentality, she wouldn't have been so anxious when she was applying. The interview was obviously an even harsher test. The interview did not only consist of an oral question, but also a written test. Whistling, Qin Zhao entered the hotel. He saw Li Qing sitting at the counter. Auntie Li, where's that fatty Ethan? He went out, Li Qing said. Qin Zhao, after you took Xiao He away for a few days, a few unfamiliar faces appeared nearby. They're all Chinese. They're probably here for Xiao He. Huh? Qin Zhao raised an eyebrow. Xiao He's domestic enemies are all here. I think so. Auntie Li, are you sure they're here to kill Xiao He? They're not here to kill you? I know my own family. I have a few heartless relatives, but they won't go to such great lengths to come all the way here to kill me. But I'm not sure about Xiao He. Why not? Her family has already been destroyed. They don't have to kill her, right? They might not be here to kill her, Li Qing said. Li Qing said, it's possible that she took something from the god refining sect. It could be a magic treasure or a cultivation technique. Li Qing had asked Qin Zhao to take Xiao He away mainly because she wasn't confident that she could protect her. Okay, I got it. Qin Zhao took out his phone and dialed West's number. West, your little princess is being watched. What? What happened? West had wanted to meet Xiao He before. But after some consideration, he didn't want to disturb Xiao He's normal life. That was why he didn't show up. In the end, his idea had just been implemented. Xiao He had gotten involved in the conflict of the spiritual world again. Qin Zhao didn't plan on interfering. Not long after, someone came outside. It was Nagasaka Reiko from the Supernatural Organization. West had sent her. Because other than Qin Zhao, Nagasaka Reiko was the only Asian in the organization. He felt that since they had the same black hair and eyes, he would feel more at ease when interacting with Xiao He. However, West didn't know that Xiao He had just come out of China and was a fugitive. Therefore, she was especially sensitive to strangers with the same skin color. When Nagasaka Reiko walked toward Xiao He's body was already tense. Niho. Nagasaka Reiko was about to speak. Suddenly, Xiao He turned and ran. Nagasaka Reiko froze. What was going on? Was she that scary? In the hotel, Qin Zhao and Li Qing both saw the scene. Li Qing asked, Your people? Yes. Qin Zhao nodded. Did Xiao He get attacked recently? Why is she reacting so violently? No, but she probably sensed the situation. Yesterday, she said she was going to rent a house outside. She probably doesn't want to drag me and Ethan down. Qin Zhao glanced at Nagasaka Reiko. Chase after her. What are you waiting for? Yes. Nagasaka Reiko immediately chased after Xiao He. Xiao He looked behind her and realized that Nagasaka Reiko was very fast. She was scared out of her wits and didn't dare to stop. Nagasaka Reiko complained. Speed wasn't her forte. Her current speed was indeed extraordinary, but she couldn't keep it up. After thinking for a while, Nagasaka Reiko thought of a solution. Mantra, Wind Sickle Power. Wind Sickle was a Japanese monster transformed from the wind. It hid in the wind. It was very similar to a meerkat, but it was a different type of monster. Meerkats were also wind elemental monsters, but one was an animal-type monster, while the other was an elemental monster. The mantra spell that Nagasaka Reiko used was similar to China's Divine Strike. Chapter 28-20. Huaxia's Godly Strike borrowed the power of immortals. Dongying's mantra borrowed the power of monsters. Of course, there wasn't much difference between the two. Maybe there was a big gap between the strength of monsters and immortals, but most of them exceeded the upper limit of human beings. Secondly, the upper limit of the power that humans could bear was also limited. It was like a person going to the bank to borrow money. There wasn't much difference between finding a bank with a total assets of 10 billion and a bank with a total assets of 100 billion. Nagasaka Reiko's body was immediately wrapped in a layer of dark wind. If a spiritualist were to look at it, he would notice more things. Xiao He also found something unusual about Nagasaka Reiko. At the same time, she also found that Nagasaka Reiko's speed was ridiculously fast. Xiao He could only grit her teeth and use her acceleration spell. She didn't have any intention of fighting. She still subconsciously wanted to run away, regardless of the strength of the other party. When she was in China, most of the time, she would run first. The only time she fought was when she was with Wang He. If she ran away at that time, Wang He would definitely fall into the hands of the other party. She didn't realize that she was now abroad, and this wasn't the home ground of the enemy. Just like that, one chased and one ran, both sides ran with all their might. The hotel was originally remote, in the suburbs of Los Angeles. Xiao He ran again and accidentally ran out of the city of Los Angeles. And Xiao He was also honest and just ran along the road. Nagasaka Reiko was about to have a heart attack at this moment. She wasn't an enhancer, and her stamina couldn't keep up at all. Even if there was a spell that could borrow the power of monsters. But the monsters only lent her the power of the wind. It made her run faster, but it couldn't make her endurance longer. Xiao He, who was in front, wasn't much better than Nagasaka Reiko. She wasn't an enhancer either. Although it wasn't a godly strike spell, it was still a spell that could lighten the body. Although it could make her run faster, it also consumed stamina. Finally, the two stopped running. They really couldn't run anymore. The two women, one in front and one behind, hugged their knees and gasped for breath. "Don't chase, you! Can you speak English?" "I don't know Chinese," Nagasaka Reiko said with a dry mouth. "You don't know Chinese? You're not from China? Could it be that those people hired you to kill me? I'm not here to kill you. Your God Refinement Sect and the Supernatural Organization are partners. Our Vice President heard you were being chased here, so he sent me to talk to you." Nagasaka Reiko didn't care about her image anymore. She wiped her dry lips. Xiao He, who was in the front, was almost the same. When she heard Nagasaka Reiko's words, she relaxed a little. But she didn't completely believe Nagasaka Reiko's words. After all, he had escaped from many pursuits. How could he easily believe the words of others? "What evidence do you have?" Little he questioned. "My dear mother, what proof could I have? Your family has already been destroyed, so why would I need to lie to you?" Nagasaka Reiko also felt stifled. There was no evidence, just two words. "Whether you believe it or not has nothing to do with me." Then the evidence came knocking. To be precise, he was a witness. A group of people who looked like bad guys appeared. However, this group of bad people drove a car and blocked Nagasaka Reiko and Xiao He. These two idiots clearly didn't need to use their legs to solve the problem. Anyone with a bit of brain would know that driving was more convenient than running. Why did they have to run 20 or 30 kilometers with their legs? Looking at the bad guys who got out of the car, Nagasaka Reiko and Xiao He suddenly realized that there was a hole in their brains. Xiao He didn't say anything, but Nagasaka Reiko realized that she had a car, and she had driven over. Why did she have to run away? When Xiao He saw the people coming, her face suddenly turned ugly. She only recognized one of them, her martial uncle, who was also related to her by blood. At the same time, he was also one of the main culprits who betrayed her father. "Xiao He, long time no see." Yi Xingchen looked at Xiao He with a smile. He was a few years older than Xiao He, and he looked like a big brother. In fact, he was one generation older than Xiao He. Of course, Xiao He was a young lady who was raised freely, so she couldn't be compared to Yi Xingchen. Yi Xingchen had always been working hard in the spiritual world. His cultivation methods were first class in the entire Huaxia's spiritual world. Xiao He looked at Yi Xingchen with a face full of anger. Nagasaka Reiko glanced at Yi Xingchen and the others and asked, "Enemies?" Xiao He looked at Nagasaka Reiko's position and posture change, and nodded slightly. "They're after me," Nagasaka Reiko shouted. "Everyone, this is not your territory. If you want to cause trouble here, you'd better inform the Supernatural Organization first." "Haha! Supernatural Organization!" Everyone, including Yi Xingchen, laughed like crazy. Except for Yi Xingchen, everyone else was hired by him. They were all private jobs in the spiritual world, and some of them were even international. Of course, they knew the industry rules of paying respects when they landed. But this rule was only for the top forces. For example, a top-notch faction in a region would have its own sphere of influence. When the others came to this area, they would either keep a low profile or pay respects to the port first, indicating that they would leave after finishing their business. And in this large area, there were many small forces attached to it, so there was no need to pay respects. In their view, the Supernatural Organization was one of these small forces. They didn't know if there were any big forces in North America, but they didn't think the Supernatural Organization was qualified to make them pay respects. Nagasaka Reiko seemed to have expected this kind of reaction. She had now been promoted from an outer member to an official member. Together with her colleagues, she had dealt with many cases of foreign spiritualists causing trouble in the Los Angeles area. When those spiritualists heard about the supernatural organization, most of them were arrogant. Before they were beaten up, they were all arrogant. But as long as they were here, Nagasaka Reiko really wasn't worried. Even if she was alone now, she never worried that she would lack support. This was her home field. "I'll give you a chance to apologize," Nagasaka Reiko said flatly. "Also, pay the fee for entering the country illegally." What did it mean to enter the country illegally? That meant that they didn't like you and you had entered the country illegally. Suddenly, a cold light shot at Nagasaka Reiko without warning. Whoosh! A glass-like halo suddenly flashed on Nagasaka Reiko's body, blocking the cold light outside the glass. Nagasaka Reiko loosened her palm, and a pile of ashes fell. Single-use magic tool, Dragon's Lament. Nagasaka Reiko looked at the defunct Dragon's Lament with pity. It was good, but it could only be used once. What a pity. Chapter 28-21. It was Ruan Faxpan's proudest work. Of course, apart from the outrageously high price of the magic materials. It also contained Ruan Faxpan's design and philosophy. Unless it was an attack that exceeded a certain limit. Most of the time, Dragonbone's Sorrow could block most attacks. Its upper limit was about 60% of a dragon's attack power. Its defense was very, very shocking. Apart from its high price, there was another disadvantage. It was a consumable item. Forget about Ruan Faxpan's labor and time cost. The price of the magic materials alone was the same as a top-end Porsche 911. Nagasaka Reiko felt that it was a pity. After all, this thing had helped her block many magic attacks. She didn't expect it to be scrapped here. But the attack just now was indeed not weak. Although Dragonbone's Sorrow had already lost 70% of its defense, it still had 20% left. However, at the very least, 2 or 3 points of the Dragonbone's Sorrow remained intact. With a single attack, the Dragonbone's Sorrow's final bit of defense disappeared. This was enough to prove the power of the attack. A silver-haired woman also looked at Nagasaka Reiko in surprise. "Ice magic!" She was a spiritualist from Greenland, Artilai Mace. She also had a special bloodline. She could absorb the cold air in the air. Every time she left Greenland for a mission, she would absorb enough cold air. The cold air could multiply the power of her ice magic. She was confident that the attack just now could freeze the girl into a block of ice. But under her confident attack, the girl was actually unharmed. Artilai Mace walked forward. "Can I play with this girl?" "Go ahead." Yixingchen was quite relaxed. If it was a place with strong forces in the spiritual world, they would usually end the battle quickly. There was rarely time for people to entertain themselves. Take the Huaxia region as an example. In the entertainment industry there would be someone who would stand up for injustice at any time. Once, a foreign organization had chased them all the way to a small village in China. In the end, a farmer with a hoe kicked a group of spiritualists until they couldn't take care of themselves. Plus, Chenzhou was nearby. Nagasaka Reiko wasn't scared at all. Right now, she was thinking, come. Whoever is scared is a coward. But to them, this was North America. To them, coming here to carry out missions was a form of leisure. Atari Mat's hands were emitting cold air as a cruel smile appeared on his face. She had confirmed that her attack just now was blocked by Nagasaka Reiko's magic tool. However, that attack had also destroyed the magic tool. Next, it was time for her solo performance. Nagasaka Reiko frowned, opened her jacket, and pulled out a ring from the inside. This action caused everyone to be stunned. Because of the ring on Nagasaka Reiko's hand. Each ring exuded a dangerous aura, and when the auras of all the rings were mixed together, it was as if bottles of dangerous chemicals had been randomly poured together. Nagasaka Reiko calmly put a ring on her ring finger, and then picked a ring and put it on her middle finger, then her index finger, pinky finger, thumb, and then changed to the 5 fingers of her right hand. Everyone's expression was a little strange. Was this woman the Lord of the Rings? The people of the supernatural society all had the idea that if they didn't have enough magic, they would have to make up for it with equipment. Magic resistance buff, physical resistance buff, mana buff, perception buff, spellcasting buff, mana recovery buff. Each ring represented a different effect. All of them used certain parts of the dragon's body as the main magic material. In terms of function and effect, it was much stronger than similar magic tools on the market. Furthermore, Ruan Faxi had also followed the settings of a certain movie. Every time a ring was added, the rings would resonate with each other, thus further enhancing the effect. Even in some specific combinations, there would be a third effect. For this reason, Ruan Faxi had specially compiled a set of equipment guide. Nagasaka Reiko smiled and opened her arms. She clenched her left palm slightly, and a cold current appeared in front of her. The cold current quickly condensed into a human figure, hovering above the ground. A beautiful woman in a kimono, her whole body covered in frost, appeared in front of everyone. Yukino! Many people recognized this woman in white. She was the famous monster in Japan, Yukino. Play with her. Sorry, master, can you speak Japanese? I don't understand English. Nagasaka Reiko didn't even have time to finish acting before she was slapped in the face by her own Shikigami. Fortunately, the others didn't speak Japanese, otherwise it would be embarrassing. Artilai Mace didn't feel good. Because all of her magic was ice magic. It was very effective against normal enemies. But against ice monsters? Was she going to buff them? I'm not good at dealing with this kind of enemy. Artilai Mace decisively admitted defeat. Instead of being beaten to the point where she couldn't take care of herself and then asking for help, it was better to be straightforward. At this time, a bald man came out. I'll do it, I'm good at it. With that, the bald man's fists burst into flames. Nagasaka Reiko quietly formed a seal with her hands. 2 flames appeared, one green, the other dark red. The 2 flames quickly turned into 2 monsters. The green flame turned into a bird-shaped monster, Green Heron Fire. The dark red flame turned into a 100-faced monster, Grand Ant Fire. The Green Heron Fire was condensed from the soul fire of birds, while the Grand Ant Fire was condensed from the resentment of lonely old people abandoned in the mountains. Both Green Heron Fire and Grand Ant Fire were Yin Fire, but full of resentment for the world. They weren't Nagasaka Reiko's Shikigami, but summoned monsters. They weren't weaker than snow girls, but they weren't smart enough, so they weren't suitable as Shikigami. Yi Xingqian's expression changed. Where did this Japanese woman come from? She was so powerful. Since when did Japan have such a genius girl? He'd never heard of her. She could summon 3 big monsters at once. This strength couldn't be underestimated. The bald man was also slightly embarrassed. If Artilai Mace's attacks were ineffective because they had the same element, then the bald man would be countered. Then the bald man would be countered by her. His fire element wasn't weak, but he hated enemies with Yin Fire the most. Not only were his attacks ineffective, but it would also be very troublesome if he was touched by the Yin Fire. This woman is powerful. Let's attack together, Yi Xingqian said. Nagasaka Reiko didn't panic at all. She still had a big move. I'll give you one last chance. Get out of my sight now or else. As soon as Nagasaka Reiko finished her warning, she heard Chen Zhao's voice. Warning my ass. Beat her down first. Chapter 28-22. Nagasaka Reiko felt stifled. Can you move according to my rhythm? But she couldn't say this, at least not in front of Chen Zhao. So, Nagasaka Reiko decisively chose to obey Chen Zhao's order. Facing a large wave of enemies, under normal circumstances, Nagasaka Reiko would cover her head and run. But with the ring, she dared to face anyone head-on, except Chen Zhao. She even dared to use an ultimate move that she hadn't dared to before. Nagasaka Reiko looked up at the sky. You force me to do this. Nagasaka Reiko sighed. Using an ultimate move during the day was so tiring. At the same time, she looked back at Xiaohe. Can you take me home later? What? Xiaohe looked at Nagasaka Reiko, confused. Just then, the sky suddenly darkened. A patch of dark clouds covered the area. Nagasaka Reiko's lips moved, but she wasn't chanting. She was muttering. She didn't like using this move, especially during the day. Especially since it was almost noon, when the yang energy was the strongest. Suddenly, a cold wind blew past. Yi Xingqian and the others couldn't help but shiver. They just wanted to surround and attack, but now they wanted to retreat. The cold wind made them feel uneasy and indescribable danger. Behind Nagasaka Reiko, a series of real or illusory or real figures appeared. Everyone's expression changed drastically. A few of them were even more panicked and terrified. Most people only felt danger. However, the ones who seemed to be in a panic knew more than them. They recognized this spell. Ghost Parade. It was one of the 2 forbidden spells along with the Western Kingdom of the Dead. Of course, it was called a forbidden spell because it was too difficult to cast. Those who had truly mastered this spell would still use it in times of danger. Yi Xingqian felt stifled. Why did such a ruthless Japanese woman suddenly appear? You're so strong. Do you really have to fight us to the death? The road is wide open. Who can stop you if you want to run? We have small arms and legs. Do you really have to use Ghost Parade? Do you know what the consequences of Ghost Parade are? Yes. Of course Nagasaka Reiko knew. So she felt even more stifled now. Do you think I want to? Do you think I want to use the Ghost Parade on a hot day? Actually, Chen Zhao didn't force her. With her identity as the Lord of the Rings, even if she didn't use the Night of 100 Ghosts, she could still rely on her skills to take down the opponent. But she still wanted to show Chen Zhao that she could fight. He did not become an official member through nepotism. The Night of 100 Ghosts was obviously the most powerful move. Apart from the temporary contamination of the area, the user would faint for 3 to 5 days due to mana exhaustion, and would be physically weak for 3 to 5 months. There were no other side effects. Moreover, during the day, especially at noon, the effects of the Ghost Parade would be greatly reduced. However, it was enough to deal with these people. The illusion of a huge long-faced demon appeared. That was the demon commander Slippery Demon, the most powerful demon in Japanese legends. With Nagasaka Reiko's strength, it was impossible for her to summon a slippery fellow. This was just a wisp of crafty scoundrel's aura. But even so, it was enough to freeze the atmosphere. More and more demons appeared. However, some of them were too weak. They were so weak that they were reduced to ashes in 2 steps. The powerful demons hadn't completely appeared yet. At Nagasaka Reiko's command, all the demons that had appeared charged toward Yi Xingqian's group. The strongest of the demons that had appeared might not even be as strong as a dog. But they had the advantage in numbers. They pounced on the opponent and bit one person in 3 to 5. The opponent was a spiritualist and would not be hurt by these little demons, but they would definitely be flustered. Nagasaka Reiko was not in a hurry. The Night of 100 Ghosts was like this. As time passed, the bigger and bigger demons would appear, and the situation would slowly tilt in her favor. Right now, the opponent was just resisting with his back against the wall. Nagasaka Reiko had a very light and breezy attitude. Without even looking at the situation on the battlefield, she picked up the phone. Mr. West, I'm on Route 9 now. Can you send Henry and the others to clean up the battlefield later? I cast a polluting spell. There will be a lot of demonic aura nearby. If ordinary people come in, they will be polluted and demonized to a certain extent. Nagasaka Reiko was talking on the phone as if nothing had happened. Seeing Nagasaka Reiko's attitude, Yi Xingqian immediately shouted, "Don't fight with those little demons. Take down that woman first. Otherwise, we're all finished." With that, Yi Xingqian took the lead and rushed toward Nagasaka Reiko. Along the way, several demons that had decent power immediately intercepted Yi Xingqian. Yi Xingqian's figure flashed, and suddenly, 3 figures that looked exactly like him appeared. Yi Xingqian's real body continued to rush toward Nagasaka Reiko. "Watch out!" Xiao He exclaimed. Nagasaka Reiko didn't even look up. She was still on the phone, and her empty right hand casually raised. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Suddenly, a sharp, ear-piercing sound rang out. Yi Xingqian cursed inwardly and immediately retreated. At the same time, several clones appeared in a flash. As for the clones, they were instantly sliced apart. In front of Nagasaka Reiko, thin threads that could not be heard appeared. If it weren't for the bloodstains on those threads, it would have been even harder to detect. Behind Nagasaka Reiko, 8 insect legs appeared. The legs slowly spread out like petals, and then an even larger body appeared behind Nagasaka Reiko. Bride Luo. Half-body woman, half-spider. And this Bride Luo's demonic aura was even more terrifying than the Snow Woman. At the same time, it was accompanied by a strong smell of blood. Bride Luo was not Nagasaka Reiko's Shikigami, she was Nagasaka Reiko's spirit possession demon. This was an extremely special spell of the Japanese Shinto. It was similar to the ghost-raising spell of Southeast Asia, but it was different. The spirit possession demon was to first find a suitable demon, preferably a growth cycle similar to that of a human, and at the same time have enough room for growth. Then, the host's soul was deposited in the body of the young demon. In the process of growth, the young demon would merge with part of the host's soul, and finally, the two would merge into one. Bride Luo was a very good choice. Her lifespan was almost the same as that of a human, and she was powerful. But Bride Luo was extremely difficult to catch, especially when they were social demons. The young demon would be protected by the main group, and outsiders would not be able to touch them. Nagasaka Reiko had raised this Bride Luo since she was young. And the process was rather cruel. Qin Zhao knew this too. Of course, Nagasaka Reiko's method was cruel. But the feed she chose was still accepted by Qin Zhao and the supernatural organization. For Qin Zhao, as long as the target was suitable, it didn't matter how cruel it was. They were all people who deserved to die anyway. Chapter 28-23. The battle was already over when Nagasaka Reiko used the 100 Ghosts Parade. At this time, Nagasaka Reiko couldn't be defeated. At least not by the people in front of her. Because at this time, she could mobilize the power of any monster at will. She was like a collection of monsters. Yi Xingqian had obviously made the worst choice. And he couldn't even win over a bride, let alone win over Nagasaka Reiko. In the supernatural organization, a few of the top members all had trump cards. For example, Gila's Sundead Army and Abyssal Demons. For example, Norma's Nightmare Transformation. For example, Gaia's Dragon Form and Angelite's Supersonic Speed. When they used these trump cards, it often meant that victory was beckoning to them. Now Nagasaka Reiko also had a trump card. She wasn't at the top yet. In the supernatural organization, she was still at the bottom. After using the 100 Ghosts Parade, she directly became a high-end combat power on par with the other top combat powers. But her 100 Ghosts Parade still had a big flaw, so she was still a long way from being a real high-end combat power. In a moment of carelessness, Yi Xingqian's shoulder was cut open by a thin thread. It almost completely cut open his shoulder. Yi Xingqian hurriedly retreated in fear. He shouted, "Go, get out of here!" Yi Xingqian decisively turned around and ran. The others also didn't want to fight anymore. In just a short while, there were already 2 casualties. If they fought again, everyone would probably be left here. Nagasaka Reiko didn't stop them too much. She could actually stop them if she wanted to. But she almost couldn't hold on. The longer the 100 Ghosts Parade lasted, the more powerful the summoned monsters would be. But it also meant that she would face greater pressure. The reason why the 100 Ghosts Parade and the Kingdom of the Undead could be called the 2 forbidden techniques of the East and the West. Because there was no limit to the 100 Ghosts Parade. But no cultivator could keep it up until the end. Usually, after the battle, they would take the initiative to cancel the 100 Ghosts Parade. Or if their body collapsed before the battle was over, the 100 Ghosts Parade would automatically cancel. The moment the 100 Ghosts Parade was cancelled, Nagasaka Reiko also lost the power of the monsters. Her body collapsed to the ground, trembling slightly. Seeing Nagasaka Reiko's state, Xiaohe immediately ran forward and asked, "How are you?" "I'm fine," Nagasaka Reiko said weakly. "What do we do now?" "Wait for my people. The vice president and the other members will be here soon." Nagasaka Reiko knew that Chen Zhao was nearby. She couldn't sense where Chen Zhao was hiding, but he was definitely there. Not long after, West arrived with Henry and the others. Henry and his men were now part of the Supernatural Organization's team. He was in charge of dealing with the traces left behind by the Supernatural Society. Simple ones included destroying corpses, but more serious ones included the destruction left behind by large-scale battles. "Henry, I'll leave this place to you," Nagasaka Reiko said gently. "Leave it to me. It won't be a problem," Henry said confidently. This was not the first time he had done something like this. The current him was completely different from the past. Ever since he had followed his boss to the Supernatural Organization to cause trouble for no reason. Then, after boss was stuffed into the meat grinder, he changed. He no longer needed to follow someone else to the police station for that meager reward. He no longer needed to face off against the police at great risk. He was now an official member of the Supernatural Organization. Of course, he was also the weakest official member. But he was also one of the most indispensable members. He had solved many problems for the organization. Even Chen Zhao often had to rely on his ability. Henry's first ability was to fart, a very, very smelly gas. However, as his ability was further developed, he discovered that there was something unusual about his ability. It wasn't as simple as farting. If he had to explain his ability, it could be called supernatural purification. The gas he released could neutralize the remaining magic, demonic aura, and death aura in the air. In a short period of time, the environment would return to normal. Through this neutralization, he could also recycle the gas and refine it, making it a part of his power. Although this kind of cultivation process was slow, it was also unique. West came to Xiaohe. "Hello, Miss Yi. I'm West, the vice president of the Supernatural Organization. I don't know if your father told you about our alliance." "I didn't hear it from my father." Xiaohe looked at West warily. She wasn't sure if he really wanted to save her. Or was he here for the thing in her hand? After all, she'd experienced some things. So, Xiaohe was no longer a little rabbit that had just left the rabbit's nest. She knew how sinister people were. Some people and some things couldn't be judged on the surface. Okay. I'm very sad about your father and what happened to you. When I heard that something happened to your father, I actually wanted to go and help him, but you know that the Huaxia supernatural world isn't a place where outsiders like us can come and go as we please. Our abilities are limited." Xiaohe didn't speak. She was thinking about West's intentions. Was he really just lending a helping hand because of an ally that wasn't so reliable in the past? Xiaohe didn't believe that West would be so kind. After all, the God Refinement sect had a few family friends or her father's good friends in China. But when it came to the critical moment, there wasn't even anyone to help her. She didn't believe that a bunch of foreigners would help her. "Fortunately, our president was in China at the time, so I asked him to bring you out of the country." "I wasn't brought out by your president," Xiaohe said indifferently. "Are you sure?" West smiled at Xiaohe. "Of course I'm sure." "Then why do you think that the person who brought you out isn't our president?" "How is that possible?" "He's Chinese." "Why can't a Chinese be our president?" Xiaohe was somewhat shocked. "Are you serious? Brother Wang is really your president." "Brother Wang? Who?" "Huh. Not Brother Wang. The president I'm talking about is Chen Zhao." "Huh. Mr. Chen?" Xiaohe was even more shocked. "Of course. Who else do you think he is?" "Him? Isn't he an ordinary person?" "He's not an ordinary person. He's very powerful. At least, he's more powerful than the people I know. Xiao He didn't refute. She thought that these foreigners didn't know what a real expert was like. The Japanese lady was indeed very powerful, but that was nothing. After all, Xiao He was the young mistress of the God Refinement sect. She had seen the world. She had seen a truly terrifying expert. Therefore, she didn't agree with West at all. In other words, Mr. Chen knew my identity from the beginning? Chapter 28-24. After finishing his work, Henry drove his newly bought car home. In the past, Henry was hated by everyone. Everyone in the family hated him. But it was different now. His family was filled with disbelief. Now, Henry had a well-paid and decent job. He drove a luxury car to and from work every day and dressed differently from before. In the past, Henry dressed in a sloppy street style. He was the same in winter and summer. Most of the time his family could see him, it was when he went to the police station to bail him out. At first, his family thought that what they saw was a facade. Maybe Henry was still doing something illegal. Until they found Henry's tax return. Only then did they know that Henry was looking for a proper job. After all, illegal activities couldn't be filed. But when they asked Henry what kind of job he did, Henry said that he was in the company's confidential department and involved many core secrets. It was not convenient for him to reveal the specific content of his job. "Mom, I'm back." Henry still lived with his mother. "Henry, you're back so early. Don't tell me you skipped work?" Henry's mother was in her early 50s, but she looked like she was in her 40s. She was a relatively ordinary woman. In her early years, she was actually a delinquent. Later, she married an alcoholic and divorced him. She raised Henry and his children alone. But because of the burden of life and work, she didn't have much time to control Henry. This also caused Henry to be particularly rebellious. It could be said that he inherited her personality. But Henry was luckier than her. Although Henry went astray for a few years, he still found an opportunity. "Mom, I just finished my work early." Henry shrugged. "Look what I bought you. This is expensive, right?" Henry's mother took the box. It was a magnetic therapy machine for the neck. Henry must have found it when she watched a shopping show last time. "It's not expensive. The price is acceptable." Henry enjoyed his current life and treasured it very much. "Mom, I've already bought a house outside. Are you moving out?" Henry's mother asked, a little disappointed. But this was inevitable. In the past, Henry did nothing. If he didn't work, he would only cause trouble. That was why he had been living with her. It was different now. He already had a stable job. Naturally, he had to move out like his brothers and sisters. "My new house is very big. I can't live in it alone. I hope you can live with me." Henry was still reluctant to part with his mother. "No, I don't want to cause trouble for you and your future wife." How long did she think Henry had been working? In less than a year, even if he saved some money, he would barely be able to buy a down payment for a small house. Furthermore, he might not be able to get along well with his future daughter-in-law. "Mom, I'm serious. My future girlfriend and wife needs to learn how to get along with you first." "Henry, you've really grown up, but I don't think you can take it for granted." "No, Mom, my house is really big. It's a villa. I don't want to clean it alone." "Villa? How could this be? Where did you get so much money?" "The down payment was paid by my boss." "How is this possible? What does your boss do?" Henry's mother was suddenly afraid that Henry's boss was just using a legal-looking company to disguise his illegal business. Perhaps Henry was still carrying on his illegal work. If that was the case, it would be no different from the past. "Mom, don't worry. He's doing serious work. Dash and beer is his business. To tell you the truth, I'm actually in charge of supplying him with raw materials. Dash and beer is selling so well, so there must be a secret formula. However, if ordinary people were to supply the raw materials, it would be easy for others to guess the formula. Therefore, I signed a confidentiality agreement with a few others. Our boss gave us a lot of money to rope us in. Do you know what I mean? This villa was given to me by him. He said that if I work for 5 years, he'll help me pay off the balance of the villa in one go. I see. Henry, do your best. Don't let your boss down. Of course, but Mom, you also need to keep it a secret for me. You don't know what methods our boss's competitors will use to get the formula. I know. I've watched spy TV shows. Henry's mother finally understood what her son was doing. She was happy and relieved at the same time. In the past, when Henry's job was mentioned, Henry always acted like he had something to hide. Henry's mother always worried that Henry's job was not as legal as it seemed. Now, she finally didn't have to worry anymore. Mom, if you don't like Dashin beer, I can ask the boss for some coupons. Can I really? That's great. Henry's mother wasn't a heavy drinker, but she still drank 2 cans of beer with every meal. Her favorite was Dashin beer, but the price of Dashin beer was always more expensive than other brands on the market. Every few days, Henry would come back with a few boxes of Dashin beer. However, it was still not enough for her. Now, she finally understood why Henry could get so much Dashin beer. It turned out that he was an internal employee of Dashin beer. From what he said, he seemed to be a core employee, a very important one. Henry, if a competitor wants to get raw materials from you, don't betray your secrets for money. If your boss finds out, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Of course. Betray Qin Zhao? This option didn't exist in Henry's dictionary. This was simply courting death. Take me to see your new home. No, it's our new home. What about this house? I've lived here for decades. Your grandpa left it to me. See if Arco, Montel, and Jim want to live here. If not, rent it out. Mom, you'll like our new home. When Henry's mother saw the new house, she was still a bit shocked. She'd lived in the slums all her life, but she never thought that one day she would be able to live in such a luxurious house. Henry, do we have guests? Whose car is the one at the door? It's yours, Mom. That's my real gift to you. It's far from the nearest supermarket, and I don't want you to ask me to fix cars every time I come home, even though I've worked in a garage for 2 months. Seeing his mother's expression filled with disbelief and excitement, Henry felt an unprecedented sense of satisfaction. Henry, I love you. Mom, I love you too. Just then, 2 people came to the door. Henry's mother recognized them. They used to hang out with Henry. She was worried that her son would be led astray by them again. Chapter 28-25. Henry. Zella's, Morrison, how come you're here? Henry, Mr. West told us to come. He heard that you bought a new house and wanted to ask if you're planning to rent your old house. Mr. West wants to rent my house? Sort of. It's that Miss Yi who just came today. She's looking for a house now, so we told Mr. West about your situation. He asked us to help him ask? If it's someone from the company and Mr. West asked, then I'll lend the house to Miss Yi for now, Henry said. He glanced at his mother beside him. Mom, is that okay? Of course. Is that Mr. West your boss? No, he's our vice president, Henry said. When they talked outside, they always referred to the supernatural organization as a company. Qin Zhao was the boss, while West was the vice president. That house can't be rented for much, even on the market. It's not a problem to lend it to Mr. West, as long as he doesn't burn my house down. After Zellas and Morrison finished their discussion, they took their leave. Henry's mother saw that the 2 didn't drive a rundown car. It seemed to be a good car. They were also dressed well and spoke in an orderly manner. Henry, are Zellas and Morrison your colleagues too? They're under me now, Henry said proudly. You're their superior? I'm in charge of a department now. You know a few people in my department. Why did your boss take you all in? Speaking of which, it's quite a coincidence. Once, a dozen of my brothers and I went to the boss's business to make trouble. Then, the boss taught us a lesson and asked us to compensate him. We couldn't afford the compensation, so in the end, the boss asked us to stay and work until the money was paid. Later, the boss needed skilled workers, so we recommended ourselves. The boss saw that we were quite obedient during that time, so he agreed to give us a chance. I think your boss asked you to compensate to help you change. Your boss is really a good person. Ha! Yeah. Mom, if you knew what he did in the past, I think you'd swallow your words. When Xiao He interacted with West, it could be said that she was scared witless. She had been accumulating power in secret. If there was a disagreement, she would attack at any time. But the result was not what she had expected. West didn't even know about the thing in her hand, or maybe he didn't even mention it. He only arranged for her to stay and asked someone to help her find a house on the same day. Mr. Chen. Xiao He dialed his number. What is it? You're the leader of the supernatural organization? Is there a problem? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why should I tell you? Xiao He didn't know how to continue this topic. You already knew my identity? No, I only found out after I sent you overseas. Initially, I had only accepted Wang He's request, that's all. So you don't have to think about anything else. Saving you was purely a favor. Hearing this, Xiao He heaved a sigh of relief. No matter what, thank you, Mr. Chen. Xiao He was silent for a long time on the other end of the phone. Chen Zhao broke the silence first. Mr. Chen, I have something. No matter what you have, you don't have to tell me, and you don't have to use it to save your life. Neither I nor West are interested in it. Our goal has never been something in your hands. If you're in danger, you can go to the supernatural organization's headquarters to seek protection. Did West give you the address? Yes. Okay, that's it. Chen Zhao hung up. Xiao He felt complicated. Actually, she was testing Chen Zhao. After all, it was over the phone. If Chen Zhao showed any desire for that thing, then she would choose to disappear completely so that Chen Zhao would never be able to find her. She didn't have absolute trust in Chen Zhao or the supernatural organization. Actually, Chen Zhao and West had guessed that Xiao He might have the ultimate treasure of the alchemy sect. Otherwise, why would the traitors of the alchemy sect come all the way overseas to kill her? Both of them felt that the possibility was very low. Unless they had a deep grudge against each other. But Xiao He definitely didn't have a deep grudge against them. With Xiao He's age, her biggest grudge was probably someone's head she'd smashed when she was young. So, unless there were enough benefits, the traitors wouldn't come all the way to kill Xiao He. But neither Chen Zhao nor West was interested in the thing in Xiao He's hand. It was like a billionaire. Would he be interested in a commoner who won the lottery? Chen Zhao still had the disc and spear that Zhang had given him. Even now, Chen Zhao still didn't know what these two things were used for. However, Chen Zhao could vaguely feel that these two things had extraordinary origins. Perhaps it was some kind of ancient divine artifact or something like that. So, when Chen Zhao was at home, he would take them out every few days to study them. He wanted to see if he could activate them, or make them recognize him as their master. But Chen Zhao had almost tried everything, dripping blood, channeling immortal power, using water bubbles, or roasting them with fire. But the disc and spear still didn't react. More radical methods didn't work right now. They didn't look like they would last long. Chen Zhao was afraid that if he used too much strength, he would destroy the two items. As for Zhang, he still wouldn't say it directly. He told Chen Zhao to study it himself. But Chen Zhao couldn't study it at all. Most of what he knew was based on his own imagination. Only a few of them were based on popular fantasy methods. Darling, what do these two look like? Chen Zhao decided to change his method. Perhaps as an outsider, Fei Lai could give him a different answer. Spear and shield. Am I right? Chen Zhao was a bit disappointed. He shrugged. I don't know. Zhang gave them to me. I don't know what they're for. He just said that it's my reward when I came back last time. Fei Lai walked up and picked up the disc. What material is this? It's much lighter than I thought. It doesn't feel like stone or metal. It's really strange. Fei Lai flipped the disc over. There were some patterns on the reverse side. These aren't Taoist patterns. They're more like oracle bone inscriptions or marks left behind by a similar civilization. Maybe you can ask an archaeologist. Chen Zhao thought of Fao Yue Lysander, but he still didn't know if Fao Yue would be willing to help him with his attitude last time. Chapter 28-26. Mr. Fao Yue, do you have time? Mr. Chen, I'm busy right now. Fao Yue Lysander rejected Qin Zhao's invitation without hesitation. No matter what Qin Zhao wanted him to do, he didn't want to have anything to do with Qin Zhao anymore. After this cooperation ended, they would have nothing to do with each other. If Mr. Fao Yue has time, you can come and get the check you left with me last time. Fao Yue Lysander opened his mouth. In the end, he didn't reject Qin Zhao. Sometimes things were like this. Dignity couldn't beat reality. Now, he was faced with such a choice. Plus, it was an easy choice. Dignity was very important, but compared to money, it was dispensable. When? Now. Wait a moment. I'll hand over my work. A moment later, Fao Yue Lysander came to Qin Zhao's manor again. It wasn't his first time here, but he still couldn't help but exclaim every time he saw the manor's panoramic view. However, Fao Yue Lysander didn't like coming here. Because when he saw this manor, he felt like a poor man. Mr. Chen, hello? He saw Qin Zhao again. There wasn't the same tension as last time. Qin Zhao didn't give him any face either. Plus, Qin Zhao was the one who begged him to come. Hello, please sit. Would you like something to drink? No, thank you. Let's talk business first. Mr. Chen, why did you call me here? Qin Zhao took out a piece of Xian paper that he'd copied. Look at the symbols on it. Maybe they're words. Can you help me identify which civilization these symbols come from? Or do they represent some kind of message? Fao Yue Lysander picked up the paper and looked at it. It's unfamiliar, but there's a pattern to these symbols. Mr. Chen, where did they come from? A friend gave me something. I copied it from that thing. Chen Zhao looked at Fao Yue Lysander. Can you see the pattern? I'm not an expert. Even if I was, I'd need some time to analyze. Plus, Mr. Chen provided too little information. It's hard to judge. Fao Yue Lysander shrugged. For example, oracle bone inscriptions. More than 800 characters have been unearthed and discovered. This is enough to build a common vocabulary for a language system. However, less than a third of oracle bone inscriptions have been translated. I'm afraid you can't even tell the most basic information from the things you provided. Is there any way to determine the origin of these things? Haven't there been similar things in history? No. If Mr. Chen has discovered any relevant relics, I suggest that you keep them. Once the archaeologists make a major discovery, the value of the items in Mr. Chen's hands will skyrocket by 100 or even 1,000 times. Is there anyone in the archaeological world who can decipher the contents of these runes for me? Any price will do. Recently, Mr. Shilai Wenger happened to be in Los Angeles for an archaeological conference. He is the chairman of the World Archaeological Union and the most famous archaeologist. Although he has retired, his vision and knowledge are obvious to all. If there is only one person in this world who can give you the answer, it must be him. Archaeological Union? They were probably a group of people who dug up ancestral graves. Qin Zhao cursed inwardly, but he still showed enough respect verbally. Can you invite Mr. Shilai Wenger here? He rarely participates in archaeological research and exploration these days. He is now committed to promoting the Archaeological Alliance and getting more people and groups to join them. Qin Zhao quickly took out his checkbook. Then, he wrote a check and handed it to Fao Yue Lysander. Fao Yue Lysander glanced at the number on the check. It's not a small amount, but it doesn't seem to be enough to invite Mr. Wenger. This is for you. Qin Zhao said. This is from Mr. Wenger. Of course, if he agrees, I can also sponsor some funds for the Archaeological Alliance. Fao Yue Lysander sucked in a breath of cold air. This guy was really generous. The number on the check was equivalent to his own wealth. Value Lysander suddenly regretted not studying archaeology in the beginning. The shadow of the tree. Just hearing the name of the person in the tree, Value Lysander took out half of his life's wealth to invite the person. How can I reason with him? But Value Lysander clearly didn't plan to reject. After all, Qin Zhao's check was also a large sum of money. A sum that was enough to move his heart. Of course, Value Lysander didn't think that Shi Lai Wenger would reject. Shi Lai Wenger's academics were indeed respected by the archaeological world. However, he was just an ordinary person. He wasn't someone who had no desires. Therefore, Value Lysander was sure that Shi Lai Wenger would definitely accept Qin Zhao's invitation. Mr. Chen, when are you free? When can you invite Shi Lai Wenger over? I don't think it's a problem, Value Lysander said confidently. He had interacted with Shi Lai Wenger before. Although the old man looked gentle and refined, he did not dare to provoke him. However, he didn't have a scholarly temperament at all. In the past few years, he'd been in the news with at least 10 women. No one would object to calling him an old hooligan in the archaeological world. Of course, he wasn't in the entertainment industry. As long as it wasn't a sex crime, no one would care about his personal style. Therefore, no one would criticize his personal style. He'd been involved in scandals with his assistant, students, parents, and even celebrities. To deal with his romantic luck, he'd spent a lot. If he wants to attack, Mr. Wenger should be able to find the time at any time. Tomorrow afternoon, then. Oh, there's something that Mr. Chen should prepare. What is it? If Mr. Chen plans to meet Mr. Shi Lai Wenger at home, it's best to ask the women at home to leave. What? He's prejudiced against women? No. He's just too passionate toward women, especially young and beautiful ones. Okay, I understand. American society was so open. Qin Zhao had seen all kinds of people. Even a super director like Steven, who seemed great and pure in the eyes of outsiders. He was also very knowledgeable about women. Many female stars in Hollywood had relationships with him. From A-list to B-list, there were more than 2 digits. Therefore, Qin Zhao wasn't surprised at all. Chapter 28-27. Qin Zhao looked at the old man who'd come with Value Lysander. The old man almost had a penis hanging from his mouth. From the moment he'd entered the restaurant, he'd been searching for pretty waitresses. Then, he walked in Qin Zhao's direction. Suddenly, he went in another direction and went straight for a pretty waitress. Hi, ma'am. Can I have your number? Handsome men were popular, even if the man was almost 100 years old. As long as you knew how to take care of yourself, you'd have a different sensory experience. Anyway, you'd be very handsome. Qin Zhao wasn't in a hurry. He rested a hand on his temple and leaned against the window. Qin Zhao listened to Value Lysander's suggestion. To avoid beating up a 99-year-old man at home, he decided to meet outside. After a few minutes, the old man didn't seem to have a smooth conversation with the waitress. After the slap, the old man walked up to Qin Zhao embarrassed. Mr. Chen, hello? Hello? Qin Zhao stood up and shook hands with the old man. Let's talk business outside. Also, waitress. After the old man called out, the waitress who'd slapped him walked up. How may I help you? I'd like an Australian steak and a West Coast lobster, a glass of orange juice, a roast goose, and some cow mushrooms with French snails. The old man looked at Qin Zhao. Mr. Chen, do you mind if I order more? Of course not. Go ahead. When the waitress left, she mumbled something. She probably didn't say anything nice. Mr. Chen, I heard that you wanted to show me some symbols. We have 20 minutes before lunch. The old man was putting the cart before the horse, but if he could solve the problem in 20 minutes, Qin Zhao wouldn't mind his attitude. Qin Zhao took out the picture he'd prepared and handed it to the old man. The moment the old man saw the picture, his eyes widened. Qin Zhao could vaguely feel that the old man had an unusual aura. Qin Zhao looked up at the old man. So, he was a kindred spirit. The old man lifted his head and also looked at Qin Zhao in surprise. This was the first time he'd looked at Qin Zhao so seriously. Where did you get these pictures from? A friend gave me something. I copied them from it. Have you considered selling it? What price can you offer? 100,000 US dollars. What do you think? The old man recalled the number on the check. Ha! I'm just kidding. Let's continue. The words on it are the oldest human language, the old man said. Shouldn't the oldest language be the Oracle Bone script? Oracle Bone inscriptions are hieroglyphics. Even now, the academic community is still debating whether or not the Oracle Bone inscriptions can be considered a language. This is because the users of the Oracle Bone inscriptions were the ancestors of mankind. However, they were not considered real humans, but Homo sapiens. The oldest language I'm talking about is the language used by mankind. Mr. Shilai, why have I never heard of this language in the academic world? The old man glanced at Falui Lysander. Because this type of text only circulates within a small circle, and this small circle obviously doesn't include you. Falui Lysander's face turned green and red, clearly infuriated by the old man's words. The old man pointed at Falui's nose and said, You don't have the right to know. This type of text is called a primitive language. There's no other name for it. It's used to record gods. It's not an ordinary record. In ancient times there were very, very few humans who mastered it. There might only be a few people in an era. Actually, the inheritance of the primitive language hasn't been cut off. It should be one of the few human cultures that have survived to this day. Even now, it's still circulated within a small circle. Are you one of them? Me? Not really. Ha! The old man's smile contained a lot of meaning. Since Qin Zhao had already confirmed that the old man was also in the same field as him. Every word he said might be filled with deep meaning. But right now, Qin Zhao was more concerned about whether the old man could answer his questions. Mr. Chen, can I see the real thing? Not convenient. Qin Zhao replied with a smile. Fine. The old man did not insist. At the very least, he did not continue to question or persuade him. He just held the rubbing paper and looked at it. The content on this is very limited, Mr. Chen, and the content is not complete. The original text needs to be read in full before it can be translated. What I can see now is only a description of a god, the nameless god, or the unknown god. There's so much text, but only this much actual content? Primitive writing is a very complicated system of writing. You can't just look at a single character or a single line. You need to interpret the entire text. Adding a character or symbol will change the entire content. So, what I said just now is just some judgment. I can't give a definite explanation. So, if you want me to translate more content, you don't have to think about it. Forcing it would just be nonsense. What if I want to learn the primitive language? Qin Zhao asked. Do you know how many years it took me to learn the primitive language? How many years? 40. The old man said. The old man said, This is also because of my excellent talent. I've taught 10 students, but only 1 student has learned the primitive language. The other 9 students have spent decades and still can't translate a single sentence. Pretend I didn't say anything. Qin Zhao gave up. He'd be crazy to spend decades learning a language system. When you've decided and let me see the real thing, then contact me. I can't give you more help now. I'll think about it. Qin Zhao answered vaguely. Okay. The old man didn't force him. After talking about business, the dishes were served. The old man started eating as if no one else was around. Falui Lysander realized that the almost 100-year-old man's appetite was so huge. It was several times his own. Just then, Qin Zhao ordered his own portion. It was several times the old man's. Falui Lysander realized that he was the only one who was at the level of a regular person. Both Qin Zhao and the old man had shockingly huge appetites. Mr. Chen, I didn't know you could eat so much. The old man looked up at Qin Zhao. He hadn't swallowed his food yet. Not at all. Mr. Shi's appetite surprised me. Chen Zhao also wolfed down his food. Spiritualists usually ate more than regular people, but it was still limited. Except for one type of spiritualist, the strengthening type. For example, Chen Zhao's appetite was inhuman. Chapter 28:28. Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Chen. The old man left in a natural and unrestrained manner. Before he left the restaurant, he even flirted with the beautiful waitress of the restaurant. Chen Zhao wiped his mouth slowly and looked at Falyu Lysander. Feeling helpless, Falyu Lysander took out the check Chen Zhao had given him last night. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen. No need. Chen Zhao glanced at the check on the table. It's not your fault. Through the window, he could still see the old man's back as he left. It was obvious that the old man was still holding back. At the same time, he showed interest in the disc and spear in his hand. However, for the time being, the other party did not reveal any hostility. So, Chen Zhao didn't plan on attacking him. Of course, the necessary precautions were still necessary. Who knew if the old man's brain would suddenly spasm? Then, he would resort to unscrupulous means. Shilai Wenger was also thinking. It was clearly impossible to get anything from Chen Zhao through normal means. If the other party was an ordinary person, just an ordinary family, he could spend some money to buy it. However, the other party clearly knew what was good for him. Furthermore, he was rich and generous. Just a casual move was equivalent to 20 years of his normal income. If he wanted to buy something from this kind of person, he would have to throw the bank's money in his face. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to move the other party's heart. Of course, robbing them was also an option. However, it was unknown how strong or weak the other party was. Moreover, robbing others was clearly not his style of doing things. Shilai Wenger didn't even know his background. Furthermore, he was from Huaxia, the most powerful region in the spirit world. Who knew if provoking the other party would provoke a hornet's nest? Shilai Wenger had more or less come into contact with some primitive languages over the years. Therefore, this kind of primitive magic tool was not a peerless treasure. But what really moved Shilai Wenger was, there were some very special symbols on the paper Chen Zhao had provided. Shilai Wenger recognized some of the symbols. Those symbols were not as indistinguishable as Shi Wenger said. Shilai Wenger was not sure what the symbols meant. However, these symbols seemed to be very similar to the symbols he had encountered in the process of learning. Suddenly, a black shadow dashed past Shilai Wenger's car. Shilai Wenger slammed on the brakes and the car skidded several meters on the road. Shilai Wenger looked a little unhappy. He got out of the car to check the situation. Teacher! A rude voice came from behind Shilai Wenger. Shilai Wenger turned his head and looked behind him. A 2-meter-tall man stood less than half a meter behind the car. The tall man was wearing a hood, and his face was covered in scars, which made him look especially ferocious and terrifying. If the person facing him was an ordinary person, he would probably pull out a gun and shoot him in the face. That smile was too horrifying. The skin on his exposed arms was not only strong, but also very rough at the same time. It looked like it had been rubbed with sandpaper. Shilai Wenger crossed his arms. Drexak, why do you still have the courage to appear in front of me? Do you think 20 years is enough for me to forgive you? Or do you think that 20 years is enough for you to challenge me? Drexak was still looking at Shilai Wenger with that terrifying smile. Teacher, of course I'm not that naive. I'm here to pass on a message from my boss. Your boss? Yeah. What kind of person is your boss? I'm curious. He can actually suppress you. Seems like he has the ability to deal with you. If you're willing to come with me to see my boss, he should be very happy. Drexak said sincerely. Drexak said very sincerely. My boss has some matters that require your ability, teacher. I wonder if teacher is willing to come with me to meet my boss? If I refuse, are you going to attack me? Teacher, don't joke around. I know myself. Before you, I'll always be a student. Drexak looked at him seriously. My boss only asked me to pass on a message, He also asked me to come to express his sincerity to you. That's not how you express sincerity. If he's really sincere, he should come and talk to me face to face, instead of hiding behind me and sending messages. I still have something to do. I'll be leaving now. Shilai Wenger did not seem to want to spar with his student, whom he had not seen in 20 years. He returned to his car and was about to leave. But just because he did not want to fight, it did not mean that Drexak did not want to. Shilai Wenger started the car for a long time and realized that it could not move. Shilai Wenger got off the car again and looked at Drexak, who was standing behind the car. Didn't you say that you don't want to fight me? I thought you really knew your place. Teacher, the prerequisite for me knowing myself is that you know what's good for you. Then what if I don't? I'm sorry, but I have to complete my boss's order first. You should have done it long ago. Shilai Wenger sighed. You're wasting my time. Shilai Wenger started moving his limbs. His bones were making loud popping sounds. Drexak could not help but stop smiling. He became extremely serious. He knew how terrifying Shilai Wenger's ability was. 20 years ago, he could not fight back against Shilai Wenger at all. Now, he thought that he was strong enough to compete with Shilai Wenger. But when he really faced Shilai Wenger, he could not help but feel scared. Shilai Wenger brushed his hair back, revealing his forehead. Just then, Shilai Wenger's forehead suddenly split open. Drexak's expression changed again. A bloody mark also split open on his forehead. Although Drexak's expression was serious, it was not enough to make him despair. Teacher, you don't have to do this. You're using the dense blood I write from the start. I need to see how much you've grown in the past 20 years, Shilai Wenger said calmly. Just then, Shilai Wenger's body suddenly emitted a terrifying aura that was thousands of times stronger. Red light suddenly appeared on Drexak's body, blocking the terrifying aura. But he himself took a few steps back. In just a moment, the difference in strength between Shilai Wenger and Drexak was clear. Drexak's face alternated between red and white. Teacher is indeed a teacher. I thought that I had grown fast enough in the past 20 years, but when I really faced you, I realized that my growth was far from enough. No, you're already very good. At least you're not dead, Shilai Wenger said with a smile. At the same time, he let down his hair and covered the bloody mark between his brows. Drexak's expression changed again. Teacher, did you really want to kill me just now? If you didn't block that attack, then I would have killed you. Since you blocked it, then it's considered a pass. Chapter 28-29. Now, take me to see your boss. Drexak didn't expect Shilai Wenger's attitude to change so much. He thought that even if Shilai Wenger didn't kill him, he would at least make him lie in bed for 3 to 5 months. He didn't expect Shilai Wenger to change his mind. But Drexak didn't forget his mission, which was to invite Shilai Wenger to see his boss. Teacher, can I use your car? You didn't drive here? Drexak was a little embarrassed. In fact, he didn't even consider that he could successfully invite Shilai Wenger. Shilai Wenger was very difficult to deal with. Not only was he difficult to deal with, but he was also terrifyingly powerful. He was also temperamental and difficult to distinguish between good and evil. He was Shilai Wenger's only student. Drexak was the only student who had learned the primitive language. But this wasn't Drexak's luck. It was his misfortune. One night 20 years ago, he met someone. That person was his senior, who used to be Shilai Wenger's student. But his senior was in a wheelchair. Even his tongue wasn't working and he couldn't speak clearly. But he used those unclear words to illustrate the terrifying side of his teacher. Shilai Wenger had a total of 10 students. Every single one of the previous 8 had died at his hands. The one standing in front of him was completely paralyzed. He was the 9th. And Drexak was Shilai Wenger's 10th student. Drexak didn't know why Shilai Wenger wanted to kill his senior brothers. But the 9th senior's words were deeply imprinted in Drexak's mind. Then Drexak started to guard against his teacher. But he seemed to be too obvious. Shilai Wenger sensed something. This irritated Drexel as well. He decided to make the first move. He made preparations in advance. A trap. Everything went smoothly. Shilai Wenger fell into the trap he set. It seemed that everything was under his control. But Drexak was wrong about one thing. That was Shilai Wenger's strength. That night, Drexak truly saw how terrifying Shilai Wenger was. It was also on that night that Shilai Wenger left a shadow on Drexak's body and mind that he would not be able to erase for 20 years. All of the scars on Drexak's body came from that night. For the sake of this meeting, Drexak had prepared himself mentally for 20 years. He felt that he was strong enough to face Shilai Wenger. But that was the truth. What they felt might not be right. It was like an illusion in the game. I felt like I could counterattack. The outcome today was no different from that of 20 years ago. 20 years ago, Shilai Wenger said to him, who was covered in cuts and bruises, "To prove that I don't intend to kill you, you can go." The Draysaks crawled on their feet, struggled in the mud, and tumbled into the river. 20 years later, Shilai Wenger still showed his generosity and magnanimity. Although what Drexak wanted was not Shilai Wenger's generosity. What he wanted was a fair and square victory over Wenger. The strength shown by Shilai Wenger had completely destroyed all his courage and confidence. In the end, Drexak still sat in Shilai Wenger's car. When Shilai Wenger drove, he was like a steady scholar. One of his hands rested on the windowsill, gently stroking his beard. Drexak did not say anything. "When you fought with me just now, you seemed to have used a power that did not belong to what I taught you. Did it come from your boss?" Drexak was shocked. He had only exchanged one move with him. It was not even one move, but Shilai had actually sensed it. This kind of ability already made him gasp in amazement. It could even be said that it made Drexak afraid. "Don't be nervous. I don't intend to ask about your boss. After all, I will be able to see him soon, right?" Drexak remained silent, but his expression was extremely gloomy. "Do you think that I have been hiding things?" Shilai Wenger asked with a chuckle. "Is that not the case?" Shilai Wenger shook his head. "No. I have never hidden anything from you or your previous 9 students. I have taught you everything that I can and what you are willing to learn. At this time, are you planning to give me an explanation for what you have done in the past? Or are you planning to tell me that it was a scam? No, it is true that I killed them, and I was the one who initiated it." Shilai Wenger did not deny it. He was not trying to deny it. "What did they do wrong?" "They did nothing wrong. 3 of them were raised by me. They were like my own children." Shilai Wenger's tone was still calm. "Although I was reluctant, I still killed them." Drexak did not understand. He raised his children with all his heart, taught them knowledge, and then killed them? What was going on? Even if he was a bloodthirsty person, he would not specifically target those close to him, right? "And you, to be honest, you are the worst of my 10 students. Cruel, cold, and treacherous, but I did not kill you. Do you know why?" Drexak shook his head, indicating that he did not understand. The senior who was completely paralyzed was the same. Shilai Wenger knew that he was still alive. But he had no intention of continuing to kill him. Logically speaking, he had treated Shilai Wenger like that. He should be the one who deserved to die the most for sneak attacking Shilai Wenger. But he had survived. "It is hard to understand, isn't it?" Shilai Wenger said with a smile. "Because you are the only one who has mastered the primitive language. None of my previous 9 students have mastered it. They could not even master 1/5 of the content. That is why they deserve to die. Number 9 is slightly better. If you hadn't appeared, he would have been my best successor. He had already grasped 50% of the primordial language. However, because of your excellence in excellence, he was completely paralyzed and lived on as a backup. If you could really inherit all of my knowledge, then he could die in peace. However, you didn't do it perfectly. Although you have all kinds of shortcomings, your talent in the field of language saved you." Drexak did not expect that to be the reason why he was able to survive. If one day, someone who is more talented than me in languages appears, will that be the day I die? Yes. Why? Is this knowledge that important? Of course it is. All these years, you used this knowledge to exchange for power. Is it not enough to prove the value of this knowledge? Net. Apex. Chapter 2830. Shi Lai Wenger said in an extremely calm tone as he drove. If you want to learn more, you can come to me at any time. Of course, it's best before I find a better successor. After all, you'll be courting death if you come to me to learn. Shi Lai Wenger's tone was frighteningly calm. Even Drexak, who had always been lawless and regarded the law as nothing, could not help but feel a chill down his spine. Drexak treated everything as if it were nothing, because he believed that no one could punish him. But Shi Lai Wenger was different. He had the ability and the motive. Should we go left or right at the fork in front? Right. Your boss really knows how to hide. Is he wanted? He's hiding in the desert. Drexak was obviously in a bad mood, so he did not answer Shi Lai Wenger's question. The car only stopped when it could not move anymore. The two could only move forward on foot. Drexak naturally did not need to say much. One could tell how good his physique was just by looking at his physique. Shi Lai Wenger walked rather leisurely. Your boss invited me here. Did we talk about pay or something? Don't tell me that we just met. I don't have a good temper. My boss doesn't have a good temper either. Suddenly, Shi Lai Wenger stopped in his tracks. He frowned and looked at the empty desert in front of him. Drexak turned around in surprise and looked at Shi Lai Wenger. Did he notice? When he first came, he could not feel anything. He did not expect Shi Lai Wenger to be able to notice something unusual here. Drexak took out a unique badge. The moment he injected magic into the badge, the empty desert in front of him seemed to have been unzipped, and a gap of hundreds of meters appeared. Let's go in. Amazing, truly amazing. Your boss is actually so generous. Who is he? Won't you know after you go in? Shi Lai Wenger, who had been calm all this while, hesitated. The other party's generosity had already given him a show of strength. From this, it could be seen that the other party's status and strength were not ordinary. Under normal circumstances, Shi Lai Wenger was confident that he could escape even if he couldn't win. However, it was of such a scale, and it was such a special alternate space. Shi Lai Wenger was not sure that he could escape. Shi Lai Wenger knew that he was one of the best in the world. However, he would not naively believe that he was invincible. There were still many mysterious experts in this world. These experts did not show themselves. Some of them lived in seclusion in the mountains, while others hid in the city. Usually, he looked like an ordinary person. But when they felt it was necessary, everything would be different. Drexak glanced at Shi Lai Wenger and couldn't help but show some pride. What, are you scared? Shi Lai Wenger smiled. Unfortunately, this is not the fear you gave me. After that, Shi Lai Wenger strode into the crack. The crack closed like a zipper. The moment Shi Lai Wenger stepped into the alternate dimension, the surrounding scenery had already changed. This was no longer a desolate desert, but layers upon layers of mountains. Clouds filled the air. Among the mountains, one could vaguely see towering peaks. However, in the distance, one could see an indescribably towering peak. Shi Lai Wenger frowned again. This alternate dimension was far bigger than he had imagined. It was vaster than any alternate dimension he had seen before. And the spiritual energy here was unimaginably abundant. Shi Lai Wenger gazed into the distance. There was a trace of aura, obscure and small, but hard to ignore. Although it seemed insignificant, Shi Lai Wenger sensed danger from the aura. Where do we go? Shi Lai Wenger turned to look at Drexak. That highest peak is our destination, Drexak said. Looks like we have to go far. Not far. Drexak took the lead and climbed the first peak. There was a huge platform at the top of the peak. On the platform, There was a huge array made of white rock. Shi Lai Wenger looked at the array on the ground. Is this the astral teleportation in Olympian mythology? How did you know? Drexak looked at Shi Lai Wenger in surprise. Have you forgotten? I am the world's best archaeologist and theologian. One of them. Drexak corrected him. Teacher, in the past 20 years, I've traveled the entire world. I've also met many scholars. Their knowledge is no less than yours. Shi Lai Wenger smiled faintly and did not argue with his student. It was not Drexak's first time activating a teleportation array. He was very familiar with it. In an instant, a beam of light shone down from the clouds and enveloped the two of them. The next moment, Shi Lai Wenger found himself in the center of another unfamiliar building. He was also standing in an astral teleportation array. However, there were stone pillars erected around the teleportation array. From these stone pillars, one could clearly distinguish the theme here. It was definitely in the style of Olympian mythology. Right in front of the teleportation array was a building similar to the Parthenon Temple. However, this building was more magnificent and spectacular. The aura that made him feel a sense of danger also became clearer here. Drexak did not speak, but his expression became more sincere and serious. Shi Lai Wenger straightened his collar and walked straight into the temple. The entire temple was extremely spacious. White pillars hung above the main hall. At the end of the hall was a stone seat. There was a man on the stone seat. He was wearing a white robe and a golden crown. He looked simple but noble. He had a full beard and his golden hair was coiled up. The man rested one hand on his temple. He seemed to be in a deep sleep. From the man's figure, one could tell that he was not human. Even Drexak would seem insignificant in front of him. He was nearly 4 meters tall when he was sitting. If he stood up, he would probably be around 6 meters tall. Shi Lai Wenger stared at the giant in front of him. The dangerous aura was coming from him. Boss, I have brought my teacher, Shi Lai Wenger, according to your instructions. Drexak's voice was loud and clear, echoing in the hall. The man on the stone seat opened his eyes slightly. Shi Lai Wenger saw that the man's eyes were pure gold. There were no pupils or whites. Chapter 2831. As the wisest and most knowledgeable human in the world, do you know who I am? The golden-eyed giant spoke in the purest form of ancient Greek. Shi Lai Wenger took a deep breath and said, The god of war, Ares. Shi Lai Wenger himself was shocked and incredulous by this answer. He was actually facing Ares, the god of war in the Olympian mythology. What an incredible experience! But all the signs and the giant in front of him were very similar to the legendary god of war, Ares, in the legends, texts, and ancient books. They were almost identical. Shi Lai Wenger had to accept his own conclusion. The little giant in front of him was really the god of war, Ares. You are the first human to remain calm when you see me, Ares said in a gentle tone. You're not the first god I've met. Although some existences aren't really gods, or are just weak gods born from some kind of faith, you're not alone in being called a god. Shi Lai Wenger's answer was neither humble nor arrogant. One could not even feel his inner turmoil. Then are you curious why I asked you to come? Yes, Shi Lai Wenger replied. Ares pulled open his white robe and revealed his right arm. His right arm looked a little shrunken. There were many red, gold, and black runes on it. Primitive words? Shi Lai Wenger turned to look at Drexak. Those primitive words should have been inscribed by Drexak for Ares. However, Drexak's skills were obviously not up to par. So it did not achieve the desired effect. This is... My divine power has been stolen, Ares said. Now I have lost 2/3 of my divine power, and it is still flowing. I need to stop this process. Shi Lai Wenger could not help but be surprised when he heard Ares' words. Stealing divine power? Could this be done? If he could, he wanted to do it too. But the thought of it was dangerous. Especially Ares, who had been robbed once before. He must have taken precautions in this regard. So doing the same thing again would probably be hundreds or thousands of times more difficult. What about my reward? In return, I will teach you how to obtain and use divine power. Of course, I will also give you a lifespan equivalent to your current age. Shi Lai Wenger was tempted by the generous reward. But Shi Lai Wenger did not agree immediately. Because their relationship was not equal. Therefore, the initiative of this transaction would lose its balance. Whether he would be able to get his reward or not would depend on the other party. Shi Lai Wenger did not like this kind of deal. What? Are you not satisfied? Ares stood high above, his golden eyes fixed on Shi Lai Wenger. I agree to the payment, but I have another condition. What condition? I want something, but it's in someone else's hands. I need you to get it for me. Also, I have a general understanding of your situation. I can solve your problem, but the place to dispel the magic has to be my home, not here. Ares thought about it and nodded. Sure. Dresak, go and fetch that thing for your master. Yes, boss. I thought he would be your servant, but Dresak only calls you boss. Shi Lai Wenger said. I have already been betrayed by my servant once, so I don't need a servant anymore. I've already been betrayed by my servants once, so I don't need servants anymore. Whether it's between humans and gods, or between gods and gods, the only thing that won't betray is profit. That's why I only need an employer-employee relationship. I'll hire Dresak, and he'll work for me. I'll give him benefits. That's enough. Dresak is a very opinionated person. He doesn't need a god or a master to guide his life. All he lacks is power. It seemed that Ares was also a person who had suffered losses. Therefore, he was very clear in this regard. Dresak was very smart, so Ares was very easy to use. This surprised Shi Lai Wenger. Most of the gods he had seen in the past were arrogant, rude, and condescending. Even if they were not as strong as him, they still had the mentality that all living beings were ants. On the contrary, he rather admired Ares, who he thought was superior. It seemed that Ares was also a god who had been beaten up by life. It was very easy to change a god's bad habit. Beating him was more effective than any preaching. Ares now knew how to compromise. Gods were not invincible. Although it was difficult to change what was in Ares' bones. But he would no longer say silly things like, "It's your honor that I give you face. Teacher, when do you need it? The sooner the better. I can start when I get what I need." Shi Lai Wenger looked at Ares. Then, Your Excellency God of War, can you come with me for a walk outside? If you have no restrictions. Of course, my pleasure. The moment Ares stood up, his aura and the surrounding air stagnated. Shi Lai Wenger looked at Ares seriously. He had to admit that the strength he was proud of. In front of this legendary god, it was really not worth mentioning. The difference between a human and a god was indeed not something that could be made up by talent. Ares was not bound to a situation where he could only be in a different space. He could move freely. Shi Lai Wenger's request for Ares to leave this alternate dimension was actually to test him. Of course, it was also for his own safety. If Ares wanted to get rid of him after solving the problem, it was almost impossible to escape in this space. But if it was outside in his own home, then the problem would not be a problem anymore. At least, he would not be without a way to protect himself. Although Ares was in big trouble right now, if one only looked at his appearance, they would not be able to see any big problems. After leaving the space, Ares also turned into a normal person's body. Then he got into Shi Lai Wenger's car and went to his home. Teacher, give me that person's information and address. Wait, I'll ask someone. Shi Lai Wenger then took out his phone and dialed Falui Lysander's number. After some small talk, Shi Lai Wenger went straight to the point. Falui Lysander wasn't too guarded against Shi Lai Wenger, so he quickly sent the information to Shi Lai Wenger. Chapter 2832. Mr. Chen, Mr. Shi Lai Wenger seems to want to visit you. He just asked me about you and your address. I gave it to him. Falui Lysander knew the rules. Although he had given Shilai Wenger Qinzhao's address, Lysander still knew the rules. Although he'd given Qinzhao's address, he immediately called Qinzhao. Okay, got it. Qinzhao didn't think too much about it. At night, the children returned home one after another. The house became lively again. A few older children were playing in the water. Otherwise, they would chase the family pets everywhere. Little Larissa had been playing all day and was sleepy now. That was how children worked. They ate when they were hungry, slept when they were tired, and played when they woke up. To them, there was no difference between day and night. For this, Qinzhao even bought a monitoring watch. It was similar to the current health watch. Qinzhao and little Larissa each wore one. It was used to monitor little Larissa's schedule. As soon as she woke up, Qinzhao would receive a message. Now some families would use such equipment. Of course, the price of the equipment was not cheap, so the people who used this kind of monitor were mostly middle-class or wealthier families. Little Larissa had a high chance of waking up at night. In comparison, little Jerlin's schedule was much more stable. It was mainly because of her abnormal vitality. Other than eating and sleeping, she couldn't stop playing. Feilai practiced yoga on the lawn. She felt that she'd gained weight in the past 2 days. Qinzhao was speechless. 0.85 kilograms. You call that fat? Plus, you're a lifeguard, okay? Look at how much you exercise. Why don't you put on some weight? Alright, no matter what, don't try to reason with your woman. Qinzhao felt that Feilai just wanted to practice yoga. That was all. Recently, Kilo had been training weights. He'd started using the barbells Qinzhao used in the past. Of course, it was the 2-ton barbells. But he used them as dumbbells. Kilo's power came from bloodline, not magic. He was a Roma, but that didn't mean he was pure human. After all, Roma were a migrating race. In the process, they'd mixed up the bloodlines of most people in the world. So, Roma had all kinds of bloodlines. Basically, it was a hodgepodge of bloodlines. Anyway, the kid had shocking potential. At least, Qinzhao had high hopes for Kilo. Uncle, spar with me for a while. Outside, Crow shouted at the top of his lungs. Qinzhao stood up and walked into the yard. Kilo, I don't want to kill you. Pair training? Kilo's strength was already extremely shocking for an ordinary person. But for Qinzhao, it was far from enough. In Qinzhao's eyes, Kilo was no different from an ordinary person. They were all ants. Qinzhao should restrain his power and spar with Kilo? It was like asking an adult to control his strength, and an ant to practice boxing. Uncle, I'm not asking you to attack me. I just want you to be my punching bag. Qinzhao's face twitched. I think it's more interesting to attack each other. Qinzhao waved his fist. The wind howled. Kaluo felt his scalp tingle. He had no intention of courting death. He would kneel on the spot if he was even grazed by the wind from Qinzhao's punch, let alone a single hit. Forget it then. Kaluo turned to flee. Just then, Qinzhao suddenly looked outside. Here comes your punching bag. Crow was stunned for a moment, and turned around in confusion. What? Follow me. Kaluo followed Qinzhao to the door. A tall man stood at the door. He was even bigger than Gaia. One had to know that Gaia's physique was already strong enough to fight in heavyweight boxing. But this man was even bigger. But just as frightening as his size was his face. Kaluo could clearly sense the hostility emanating from this man. Kaluo frowned. He vaguely understood what Qinzhao meant. But Kaluo wasn't afraid at all. With Qinzhao's support, he would even dare to punch a dragon. Uncle, do you want me to hit him? Kaluo asked, looking up. Yes. Qinzhao nodded. Deresak didn't plan on hiding his intentions this time. But he didn't expect Qinzhao to be even more direct. Not only did Qinzhao notice his hostility, but he also wanted a child to fight him. A child to fight him? Deresak's expression immediately turned gloomy. He twisted his neck. He didn't plan on telling Qinzhao how dangerous he was. He wanted to use his actions to prove that not only was he dangerous, but he was also cruel. Smiling, Qin Zhao looked at Durasak. You'll have to suffer a bit. No, not at all, Durasak said nonchalantly. He was about to attack when he suddenly realized that he couldn't move. Durasak looked at Qin Zhao in surprise. What's going on? What spell is this? A confinement spell? When did Qin Zhao cast it? Durasak wanted to break free. As far as he was concerned, he had 100 ways to break free from this imprisonment spell. However, he soon realized that something seemed to be wrong. Okay, Kaluo, you can go. Kaluo took 2 steps forward and looked back at Qin Zhao. Uncle, I won't kill him, right? No. His body is stronger than yours. It won't be easy for you to kill him. Oh, that's good. Kaluo, go. Just then, the children playing in the yard also noticed the situation at the door. They all climbed onto the fence and cheered loudly. Fei Lai also noticed the situation and shouted, Chen, this is the door. Don't make it too bloody. Qin Zhao shrugged. Don't worry. I won't do anything today. Durasak was angry. He was angry at Qin Zhao and the group's arrogance. However, he couldn't do anything about the confinement on his body. Durasak was at his wits' end. It seemed that he could only use his ultimate move. A bloody slit appeared on Durasak's forehead. The dense blood eye had just opened. Durasak felt that his neck was being pulled and twisted by an invisible force. It was as if his neck was going to break. The intense pain and the sense of impending death caused the eye of dense blood that Drexak had just activated to be interrupted. Don't scare my children. You better behave. Qin Zhao's voice appeared in Durasak's ears. At this moment, Durasak realized it. Qin Zhao was far more powerful than he'd imagined. From start to finish, Qin Zhao's hands were in his pockets. But he couldn't even move. This was something that he'd never experienced before. Very good. It seems that you already know the rules here. If you dare to cast any dangerous spells here, I'll twist your head off. Chapter 2833. Drexak was still struggling in the dark. But very soon he gave up. In fact, he'd even used primitive words. But even primitive words couldn't break free. Bang! Kilo smashed his fist heavily into Drexak's abdomen. Drexak grunted softly. He wanted to tear the kid in front of him to pieces. But he couldn't even move a finger now. Kilo, it's not enough. You can open up more. This guy can take a beating. After all, Kilo was still a kid. He knew how terrifying his strength was. He was worried that if he used too much force, it wouldn't just be an injury. He might pierce through Drexak. Thus, he didn't dare to use too much strength. He didn't even dare to use 1/5 of his strength. Kilo punched again. This time, it was a little heavier, but only a little heavier. This punch caused Drexak to completely explode with power. Roar! The Drysak growled, and a red rune suddenly appeared on its arm. This red rune then turned into dozens of smaller red runes, continuously twining around the Drysak's arm before finally returning to his arm. Drexak's arm instantly exploded with hundreds of times its original strength. Finally, Drexak's arm broke free and he suddenly grabbed at Kilo. But before his hand could touch Kilo, it was grabbed by someone else. Drexak looked at Qin Zhao and sneered inwardly. Qin Zhao really didn't know how to live to grab his hand now. Right now, Drexak's strength was limitless. No one could withstand his current strength. But the next moment, he suddenly heard a crisp sound coming from his arm. Broken, Qin Zhao broke Drexak's arm just like that. Drexak exploded. How come his limitless strength didn't have any effect on Qin Zhao at all? Kilo, go in. You don't have to participate anymore. Qin Zhao patted Kilo's head. Just then, Dadaira, who was sitting on the fence, also pulled her brother and sister. Go in, or else we'll have nightmares again tonight. Dadaira was already at a sensible age. She knew how to solve problems for Qin Zhao and Fei Lai. Qin Zhao finally let go of Drexak's restraint. Drexak was still unwilling to give up. He looked at his numb right arm. At this time, green runes appeared on his body and fused into his arms. The arm that Qin Zhao had broken actually recovered. What? Aren't you going to use your weird binding spell? Drexak stared at Qin Zhao viciously. If we're talking about weird, your magic is even weirder. I've never seen magic like this before. My magic? This isn't just strange, you'll soon see the terrifying side of this magic. Qin Zhao lifted a finger and pointed at the air. Pop! Drexak's body suddenly lost control and crashed backwards. With a whooshing sound, Drexak discovered that all the bones in his body had been shattered. The runes on his body began to appear once more. They circled around his body and rapidly healed the damage on his body. Drexak stood up with difficulty. Qin Zhao also walked up to him. Pop! It was the same move again, and Drexak crashed into the slope. Qin Zhao did the same thing again. The ground on which Drexak lay cracked. Pop! Pop! The runes on Drexak's body no longer appeared. Qin Zhao stood before him. He kept using the same move to beat Drexak until he lost his temper. Tell me, what's so terrifying about your magic? Drexak was coughing up large mouthfuls of blood. Many things were relative. For example, the horror of primitive words was only for regular cultivators. Clearly, Qin Zhao wasn't one of them. Drexak's pupils finally revealed fear. The man before him wasn't just powerful. He was also cruel. His smile didn't change at all. From start to finish, he was still smiling cruelly. But what he couldn't accept the most was that Qin Zhao had only used one finger. It was really just a finger. This made him doubt whether he was really powerful. If he was, how could he be beaten to a pulp by Qin Zhao's finger? Qin Zhao lifted his finger and Drexak was pulled up uncontrollably. It was this feeling again. His body was bound by that power. Did Mr. Shilai Wenger send you? Yes, Drexak answered decisively. He didn't have any feelings for Shilai Wenger, so he naturally wouldn't protect him. He also felt that it would be best if Qin Zhao and Shilai Wenger could fight to the death and both of them would be injured. At the very least, he would be able to escape with Ares at the bottom. Then are you willing to take me to him? Sure. How long have you been awake? Shilai Wenger asked as he prepared. About 3 years, Ares said. Ares said, 3 years ago, I was awakened from the underground palace, and then I took that person as my believer and servant, and gave him divine power, but he turned around and used the divine power I gave him to deal with me. Your curse isn't that troublesome, Ares said. It can be solved even without primitive words. Why did it drag on until now? Shilai Wenger asked. I looked for 2 people. Both of them had the ability to remove the curse on me, but their asking price was too high, Ares said. Then I met Drexak, and he recommended you to me. What if I asked for too high a price? Or did he reject your request? Die, Ares answered. I won't let my information get out. Shilai Wenger's movements paused, and he hesitated slightly. Ares seemed to feel Shilai Wenger's hesitation. Don't worry, he said. Gods can't lie. As long as it's a promise, it has to be fulfilled. Even the god of conspiracy isn't allowed to lie. You should have a way to verify if I'm lying. Plus, I have a way to prevent you from spreading my information. Fine. Shilai Wenger shrugged. Ares' words made sense. Even if Shilai Wenger really wanted to kill him, in his current state, he couldn't kill Shilai Wenger with one blow. He still had a chance to escape. Aren't you going to help me solve my curse after Drexak brings back your reward? Drexak has improved a lot these years, Shilai Wenger said. But his efficiency has slowed down a lot. I thought he would have brought it back by now. With your strength, you can go and get it yourself, if you really need that thing. Chapter 2834. Shilai Wenger chuckled. How could it be the same for him and Drexak? Shilai Wenger still attached great importance to his status and reputation in society. Killing and robbing was something that others could do for him. He would never do it himself. With his ability, it was easy for him to go to a rich person's house. But there would definitely be surveillance cameras of all sizes. Those things were too troublesome. His identity could be exposed at any time. So, Shi Lai Wenger wouldn't do it himself. But Drysack was different. It was Chen Zhao's fault. He'd let Drysack continue to bear the blame. Anyway, many people in the spiritual world knew that Drysack had betrayed his master. They wouldn't suspect Chen Zhao no matter what. He's back. Ares looked outside and suddenly frowned. There's another person. His aura is very weak, but he's not a normal person. Shi Lai Wenger raised an eyebrow. He couldn't feel it at all. Can't you feel it? It's normal. They're more than 10 kilometers away. Drysack seems to be in trouble, Ares said calmly. His aura is very unstable. He's injured? Yes. Seems like your target is more troublesome than I thought. Ares was unhurried. Although he wasn't in his best condition, he was still the god of war, a high and mighty god. Drysack couldn't solve it, but it didn't mean that he couldn't. Finally, Shi Lai Wenger also felt Drysack and the other person's aura. It's him. Seems like I underestimated him. He can actually hurt Drysack like this. Seems like you still care about Drysack. As his teacher and my approved student, of course I have to stand up for him, Shi Lai Wenger said matter-of-factly. Chen Zhao drove into a shady farm. When he reached the fence, he stopped and dragged Drysack down. Just then, he saw Shi Lai Wenger and another person waiting for him in front of the house. Chen Zhao glanced at Shi Lai Wenger and then at Ares. Chen Zhao tossed Drysack aside and strode toward the two. God! Olympian God! Chen Zhao's voice was rather loud. I didn't expect to meet another Olympian god. Shi Lai Wenger was a bit surprised that Chen Zhao could recognize Ares at first glance. Shi Lai Wenger took a few steps forward and walked toward Chen Zhao. However, Chen Zhao's attention was not on Shi Lai Wenger at all. Facing Shi Lai Wenger, who was walking toward him, Chen Zhao had no intention of stopping. He continued to stride forward. Shi Lai Wenger smiled. Chen! Who? Shi Lai Wenger suddenly flew to the left and knocked over the fence. Shi Lai Wenger was dumbfounded. He stood up and looked at Chen Zhao. He realized that Chen Zhao had no intention of paying attention to him. Instead, he walked up to Ares. Excitement was written all over that face. Ares frowned. He didn't like the way Chen Zhao looked at him. This kind of gaze was very lascivious, as if he was looking at prey, a toy, or something else. There was not the slightest bit of respect or fear. Arrogant bastard! Ares raised his right arm and a golden sword appeared in his hand. Ares slashed down at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao raised his hand and grabbed the blade of the golden sword. Clang! In an instant, the golden halo exploded and instantly rushed forward. The main building and cowshed in the ranch collapsed instantly. Shi Lai Wenger, who had just stood up, was sent back to the ground by the impact. Ares also took a few steps back. He also stared at Chen Zhao in shock. Chen Zhao's face was filled with an excited smile. You better not resist. Last time, it was also an Olympian god. I couldn't hold it in and didn't even leave a corpse. I hope you won't force me. Chen Zhao's eyes were almost bursting with light. Shi Lai Wenger's face was extremely pale. Who was this Huaxia man? He couldn't even block one move from him? Moreover, he didn't show any fear when facing Ares. Instead, he seemed to be in high spirits. Human, you've won my respect. Who are you? Ares said coldly. I don't need your respect. Chen Zhao looked at Ares. Especially now that you're so weak. You're much, much weaker than that titan from last time. Ares' expression changed again. Just then, a crack suddenly appeared behind Ares. Ares took the opportunity to lie back, and at the same time, the crack closed. Clearly, fighting Chen Zhao was a very unwise decision. Therefore, he couldn't care about Shi Lai Wenger now. First, he had to leave this place and get away from Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao was also somewhat shocked. You're an Olympian god, after all. Can you be a little more shameless? Don't run away just because of a disagreement. Qin Zhao immediately reached out with both hands and grabbed the spatial crack that was about to close. But the moment he grabbed the crack, he felt a terrifying constricting force. It could be said that if someone else were to grab the crack, they would definitely be crushed in an instant. Open! Qin Zhao yelled, using all his strength to open the crack. Shi Lai Wenger's eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. In all these years, this was the first time he had seen someone tear open a spatial crack with brute force. But Qin Zhao's method also surprised Ares. Ares sneered and raised his arms high in the air. Instantly, the spatial crack enveloped Qin Zhao and the entire farm. Qin Zhao immediately sensed something strange. Domain? No, it's not a domain. What's with this pressure? Human, you're stronger than I expected, but aren't you looking down on me? Or are you looking down on the Olympian gods? I'm Ares, the god of war. Even in my weak state, I'm not someone you can offend. At the moment, Ares didn't seem weak at all. Instead, he was filled with majesty and vastness. His voice echoed in the air. As for you, you jumped into my divine kingdom. In my divine kingdom, I am everything, I am the heaven and earth. No one can defeat me in my divine kingdom. Divine kingdom? This was the first time Qin Zhao had heard of this term. What was a divine kingdom? Shi Lai Wenger glanced at Drexak. Drexak was heavily injured, but it wasn't fatal. This was also thanks to his extraordinary constitution. At the same time, Qin Zhao didn't kill him. Wake up, my warriors! Ares shouted. Instantly, the surrounding mountains started collapsing. Huge giants stood up from the bottom of the mountains. One by one, the rock soldiers stood up from the ground. Chapter 2835. The scene was grand enough. The giants were of different heights. The big ones might be thousands of meters tall, while the small ones were close to 1,000 meters tall. There were also the millions of rock soldiers. Each of them had an imposing aura, like rivers converging into an ocean. However, there weren't any holy armors like the ones Qin Zhao had seen before. Even the smallest of the giants was probably bigger than the Dragon Emperor. Size didn't represent power, but it still determined part of the difference in power. What did giants thousands of meters tall look like? Civil airplanes could only fly about 10,000 meters. If the tallest giants were outside, they could slap civil airplanes down with just their arms. Shi Lai Wenger and Drexak's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Was this a god? Was this the power of a god? But what Qin Zhao really cared about was that the giants' bodies were alive. They weren't made of energy or rock. They were made of flesh and blood. In other words, they truly existed in this world. Or rather, they had once existed in this world. Titan? The legendary Titan? In Olympian mythology, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades had taken divine authority from their fathers, the Titans. Of course, they might not be. After all, there were many giants in Olympian mythology. The giants' bodies were alive, but they didn't have souls. Qin Zhao guessed that they were probably some kind of puppet made by Ares. This kind of spell wasn't rare in the spiritual world. It wasn't strange to make living people or powerful cultivators into puppets either. Losers! They're all losers, defeated by me. Now they've become my soldiers, my weapons. You will become one of them. Qin Zhao wasn't surprised. As the son of Zeus, Ares was one of the 12 Olympians. At the same time, he was also the 4th generation of the Olympian gods. In the battle where the Olympian gods, led by Zeus, overthrew his father, Kronos, Ares was one of the main forces. So, it was understandable that he defeated some titans. Then, as your collection, how much of their power can they use? Qin Zhao asked casually. All of them. The strongest among them can even compete with me at my peak, and in my divine kingdom, they have all the power. When Qin Zhao heard Ares' words, he also caught the main point in his words. Divine kingdom. When they were outside just now, Ares obviously didn't want to fight him. However, After entering the god's kingdom, Ares' confidence soared. He kept saying that he could not be defeated in the god's kingdom. Therefore, Chen Zhao became cautious. He wasn't sure what this divine kingdom could be used for. Back then, the Hercules was also defeated by me at his peak. Now you are as weak as a bitch that has just given birth. Do you really think that you can defeat me with these soulless marionettes? Don't compare me to that demigod. I'm an overgod. Any arrogance you have will be torn to pieces in my divine kingdom. Here, Mr. Ares, he's trying to get information out of you. Shi Lai Wenger reminded. Qin Zhao turned around and glared at Shi Lai Wenger threateningly. Shi Lai Wenger felt goosebumps at Qin Zhao's threat. However, there was a clear distinction between them now. Anyway, Chen Zhao wouldn't let him have it easy, so he didn't need to hide their relationship. Humph. Hearing Shi Lai Wenger's name, Ares only snorted. He had the glory of a god, but he also knew that speaking too much was bound to make mistakes. Therefore, he didn't explain more to Qin Zhao. Just then, a small titan that was 1,000 meters tall charged over. Every time he took a step, the ground would shake violently. When he was 1,000 meters away from Qin Zhao, he leaped high and raised his fists above his head. Crimson light exploded from his fists. It was as if he was holding a sun. In the end, he had unstoppable power. He smashed toward Qin Zhao. Boom! Instantly, the ground rippled like a lake. A terrifying impact swept in all directions. Shi Lai Wenger immediately went to Drexak and helped him block the impact. However, everything around him disappeared in the impact. Shi Lai Wenger was speechless. This terrifying destructive power was simply unheard of. If this attack had landed in the city outside, this attack could probably destroy an entire street. It would probably only take a dozen rounds to destroy Los Angeles. But the next moment, the huge body of the Titan suddenly flipped over. Qin Zhao returned a punch to the 1,000-meter Titan. Shi Lai Wenger and Drexak were both dumbfounded. Wenger, you knew that guy was this strong? Shi Lai Wenger glanced at Drexak and didn't speak. However, his eyes had already said what he was thinking. Do I look like someone with water in my head? If I knew he was this terrifying, I wouldn't have provoked him no matter what. Even if he had a divine artifact in his hand. Qin Zhao was about to chase after him when a shadow suddenly enveloped him. A palm even larger than the 1,000-meter giant came crashing over. The largest Titan launched an attack at him. Qin Zhao turned his head and glanced at it. He raised his right palm, wanting to press it down. The largest Titan's palm was blocked in the air. Under Qin Zhao's control, Qin Zhao's small world formed a force that blocked the attack. At the same time, a dozen black balls formed in Qin Zhao's left palm. Pop, pop, pop. In an instant, the dozen black balls shot at the largest Titan at the same time. The largest Titan didn't dodge. He couldn't dodge either. His gigantic body gave him unparalleled destructive power. But it also turned him into a huge target. The moment the dozen or so black balls hit the largest Titan, they had already penetrated his skin. Each black ball had a mass of 10 million tons. Their huge mass made them almost unstoppable. Not even the legendary Titans could do it. The small black ball exploded after shooting into the body of the largest Titan. In an instant, a dozen blood flowers exploded on the largest Titan's body. Blood poured down like a torrential downpour. But if it were a normal person, it would definitely be fatal. However, the largest Titan was unmoved by this. He opened his huge mouth and a white beam of light shot at Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao instantly raised his speed to the maximum. He turned into a ball of energy and dodged the white beam. At the same time, he went for the largest Titan's head. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the largest Titan's head was smashed by Qin Zhao. But the largest Titan still didn't fall. Its headless body continued to attack Qin Zhao. Chapter 2836. Qin Zhao's eyes hardened and he pressed his palms down. In an instant, the surrounding Titans collapsed to the ground. Their bodies were crushed by the immense force. At this moment, the Rock-Earth Legion was directly crushed into pieces. In Ares' divine kingdom, the only ones who had real combat power were himself and a dozen titans. As for the Rocky Earth army, they looked imposing. In reality, they couldn't even get involved in this battle. For example, what was happening now? Before they could even touch Chen Zhao, half of them were smashed by Chen Zhao with a single slap. Even the smaller titans were slapped down by Chen Zhao with a single slap. Only the largest titans could barely exchange a few blows with Chen Zhao. But they could only exchange a few blows. But this wasn't what gave Chen Zhao a headache. What really gave Chen Zhao a headache was that the titans' bodies couldn't be destroyed. No, it wasn't that they couldn't be destroyed. It was that no matter how Chen Zhao destroyed them, even if they were smashed into pieces, they could still recover. Was this the power of the divine kingdom? Recover their bodies? Ares, on the other hand, stood high above the clouds. He looked down at the battle below. It was as if he wasn't involved. The intense battle below seemed to have nothing to do with him. The more Chen Zhao thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. At the same time, Chen Zhao released his little world completely, and enveloped the titans. Chen Zhao repeated the same process again and again. Destroy the titans, then they would be reborn. Destroy them again, then reborn again. This went on and on, as if there was no end to it. Again. The titan that Chen Zhao had destroyed started to recover from its feet, then its body, then its head. Once again, he stood before Chen Zhao unscathed. Suddenly, Chen Zhao's eyes lit up. A myth popped up in his mind. It was a legend about Hercules, who had once been defeated by Chen Zhao. Hercules had once killed a god who was close to invincible. It was Antaeus, the child of the earth goddess Gaia and Poseidon. As long as he stood on the ground, he had endless power. Antaeus was a cruel ruler. He forced everyone who passed through his territory to fight him, and he killed them in the process. Until he met Hercules. Hercules lifted Antaeus high above his head so that he could not touch the ground, and then strangled Antaeus in midair. In Olympian mythology, Zeus is the main character because he is the final victor. The heroine in the Olympian myth was not Zeus's wife, Hera, nor any of Zeus's women, but Zeus's mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, great-grandmother, Gaia, the goddess of earth. Olympus was the beginning of everything. As the saying goes, the king of gods changes every day, but Gaia is eternal. One of Gaia's hobbies in life was to have sons and then have sons with sons. Gaia gave birth to the first god king, Uranus, who then became her husband. She gave birth to the 12 titans with Uranus, as well as her youngest son, Cronus. After that, the second king of gods, Cronos, personally sent Uranus off. He also mentioned the curse that was overthrown by his son. After that, it was Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus's 3 brothers, Cronos. Gaia said that it did not matter who the god king was, as they were all her sons. Not only could she give birth, but all her children would definitely be at the top of the world. She could mate with anyone and was at the forefront of genetics. Basically, she could give birth to whoever had the strongest genes. Antaeus was the child she had with her son, grandson, and great-grandson, Poseidon. Of course, if Gaia could give birth, so could Zeus. Zeus was like a moving seeding machine. He was no weaker than Gaia in this aspect. For example, Ares, the god of war, was one. There was also an even more famous one, Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. In any case, this household register was a negative course in ethics. Chen Zhao thought of Antaeus. As Gaia's son, he had the bloodline of the Titans. He could absorb endless power from the earth. In that case, the other Titans, who had purer bloodlines than Antaeus, shouldn't be any worse. Not to mention difficult moves like the impure earth reincarnation. It should also be possible to revive from a single cell. So, Chen Zhao suspected that these Titans could not be completely destroyed because of Ares' divine kingdom, or because of their Titan bloodline. Chen Zhao pointed at the tallest Titan. Suddenly, he lifted his arm. The Titan's huge body suddenly rose into the sky. Ares' pupils constricted. A huge golden sword suddenly appeared in his hand. He shot it down from the clouds at Qin Zhao. The golden sword struck Qin Zhao's head like a bolt of lightning. But Qin Zhao was unharmed. He only raised his head calmly. Qin Zhao suddenly clenched his fist. The titan that Qin Zhao had lifted up exploded into pieces. The scene was too horrifying. The titans were already terrifyingly huge. When they turned into a ball, all their flesh and blood seemed to have been mixed together in a blender. The scene was enough to make anyone's head explode. This was how Shi Lai Wenger and Drexak felt at the moment. Fuck! Is this the guy you want me to deal with? Drexak clenched his teeth and stared at Shi Lai Wenger. Shi Lai Wenger was speechless. Indeed, it was too difficult for Drexak to deal with such a monster. The Titan's tens of millions of tons were compressed bit by bit. They became smaller and smaller, but also more and more terrifying. This did not seem to be enough to satisfy Qin Zhao's crazy actions. Qin Zhao's left hand grabbed the air again. Another giant titan was lifted up and then approached the titan's flesh that had been compressed into a ball. When the second titan approached the flesh and blood ball, its body also seemed to be peeled off. His skin, tissues, and blood were all extracted and then absorbed by the flesh and blood ball. When the second titan's body was completely absorbed into the flesh and blood ball, the flesh and blood did not grow bigger. The sphere of flesh and blood did not grow larger. Instead, it was compressed even smaller. Then the third, the fourth, imagine a dozen titan giants that weighed millions to tens of millions of tons. Their bodies were forcefully compressed into a ball less than 10 meters in diameter. What would that look like? What would that look like? But Qin Zhao was clearly not satisfied. He continued compressing the flesh and blood ball. Finally, a black ball appeared in Qin Zhao's hand. This black ball was compressed from the flesh and blood of a dozen titans. No matter what it was, once it was compressed like this, it would turn black. Even the air was the same, let alone other colors. The black ball's surface was extremely smooth, as if it was the most perfect ball. But it was also the most dangerous ball. Seeing the black ball in Qin Zhao's hand, Ares felt a chill run down his spine. Instinctively, he wanted to run. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.